Chapter 19. The two senior martial brothers who were holding onto Wu Baoru sensed that he had really fainted, and they nodded at the sect leader. The elders were all experienced fellows, and they could understand each other's intentions with just a glance. Naturally, they understood what the two of them were thinking. They had originally suspected Yu Qianshou, and with Wu Baoru's cultivation, if he really wanted to kill him, he wouldn't have been able to come here. Now, a nascent soul-stage junior martial brother had actually fainted from anger, and it was easy to imagine the injustice he had suffered. "Where are the law enforcement disciples?" Lu Changqing shouted. "Here." Several people appeared on both sides of the hall. The plaza immediately became silent, and everyone looked towards the front of the hall, knowing that the sect leader was about to make a decision. Before the truth is clear, the disciples cannot criticize. Let's put this matter aside for now. When Elder Wu recovers, the truth will naturally be clear. Lu Changqing spoke first, and then stared at the two who were complaining. Elder Wu chased and beat up a disciple in public, and everyone saw it with their own eyes. He will be imprisoned to recuperate and await punishment. Yu Qianshou publicly insulted a teacher, and everyone heard it with their own ears. He will be punished to do hard labor in the Spirit Stone mine and await punishment. Elders, do you have any objections? None of the elders had any objections. The disciples naturally didn't dare to have any objections to the sect leader's decision. However, everyone understood that this punishment was clearly to the disadvantage of Yu Qianshou. One had to know that the Spirit Stone mine was not a place for people to stay. It was clearly a place where Ong Kuangsung's disciples were exiled. The disciples who worked there were either those with poor aptitudes or those who had committed crimes. Every day, they had a quota to mine spirit stones, and if they couldn't complete the task, they would be severely punished. Until now, not many people had returned alive from that place. In everyone's eyes, Yu Qianshou was obviously the victim, but he received the heaviest punishment, which inevitably made people think of the time when he offended the sect leader and his grandson. This was clearly revenge. No one dared to say anything and could only shake their heads and sigh in their hearts. When Lu Jingguang saw that Yu Qianshou was sent to the Spirit Stone mine as a punishment, he was delighted. However, he also felt that his grandfather was being too obvious by doing this in front of everyone. "Martial nephew Yu, do you have any objections?" Lu Changqing asked coldly. "This disciple is willing to accept the punishment. I dare not have any complaints." Yu Qianshou's expression was bleak as he replied, causing all the disciples to feel sad. Little did he know that when he heard that they were going to a Spirit Stone mine, his heart began to beat wildly. With a wave of the sect leader's hand, Elder Wu was carried away. Yu Qianshou was also escorted to the Spirit Stone mine by the disciplinary disciples. Chu Ping'er stared at the lonely and staggering figure and bit her lips. She simply could not imagine the scene of such a talent working hard in a Spirit Stone mine. The sun hung high in the sky. Outside the Spirit Stone mine, there was a row of caves on each side. These were the living quarters of the mining disciples. On a piece of empty land in front of them, almost 100 dirty and ragged disciples were gathered together. On a stone pillar in front of them, a disciple was stripped naked, and his hands and feet were chained to the pillar. Whack! Whack! A barbed whip danced in the air, and a string of flesh and blood splattered everywhere. Every lash of the whip was followed by a blood-curdling scream. The surrounding disciples were all shocked. A bare-chested, fierce-looking cultivator paced back and forth with his hands behind his back. This person was an early-stage core formation cultivator named Gao Shiping. He was the overseer of this Spirit Stone mine. He was glaring at the frightened disciples like a tiger watching its prey. He viciously said, "Do you see that? This is the consequence of stealing spirit stones. I'm warning you all, listen carefully. Don't think that you can get away with it. No one can fish in troubled waters under my watch." As he spoke, he suddenly saw a flash of light in the distance. Two law enforcement disciples landed with a dejected disciple. Gao Shiping's fierce-looking face was covered with a smile. He ran over and said with a flattering smile, "Long time no see, two senior law enforcement brothers. You've sent someone to me again." As he spoke, he glanced at the dejected disciple. This person was Yu Qianshou, who was punished to do hard labor in the Spirit Stone mine. The two law enforcement disciples nodded. When they heard the whip and the blood-curdling scream, they looked towards the place where the punishment was being carried out. One of them frowned and asked, "Junior Marshal Brother Gao, what did that person do this time?" "Senior Marshal Brother, this person is very hateful. He actually dared to secretly absorb the Spirit Stone's mind in the Spirit Stone mine. When he came out, the Sect's magic treasure found out. According to the rules, he was punished with 500 lashes," Gao Shiping said. The other law enforcement disciple shook his head and sighed. "I've never heard of anyone surviving under Junior Marshal Brother Gao's Wolf Fong whip." Yu Qianshou glanced over and saw the barbed Wolf Fong whip carrying a string of flesh and blood. He was secretly shocked. He thought to himself, "What magic treasure? I still want to steal spirit stones. I don't know if it's dangerous. If I don't give a heavy punishment and everyone steals spirit stones in the future, I really won't be able to answer to the sect." Gao Shiping chuckled. He looked at Yu Qianshou and asked the two law enforcement disciples, "Why is this disciple here?" One of the law enforcement disciples shook his head and smiled bitterly. "Marshal Uncle Hao's disciple. What else do you think?" That Yu Qianshou who offended the sect leader?" Gao Shiping was shocked. Seeing that the law enforcement senior marshal brother had already nodded to confirm, he smiled fiercely and said, "Hey, so it's junior marshal brother you. You really have guts. You even dared to offend the sect leader. Old Gao, I will definitely treat you well." After that, he turned around and shouted, "Someone come." Yu Qianshou knew that he was famous in Ong Kwangsong, but he didn't expect that there would be people who knew about this spirit stone mine so far away. Soon after, a supervisor ran over and took Yu Qianshou away under Gao Shiping's arrangement. He could vaguely hear one of the law enforcement disciples saying, "Junior Marshal Brother Gao, you can't kill this person. The elder specifically said that he still has a use for us." The supervisor brought him to the group of disciples who were mining the mine. First, he showed him what it meant to be whipped until his intestines were broken. After seeing it, Yu Qianshou didn't have any reaction. He also didn't think that the disciple who was being punished was worthy of pity. In his words, "Since you dare to steal, then you should be prepared to be caught. You don't deserve other people's pity for courting death." He looked around at the disciples who were mining the mine. All of them were skinny. Other than the fear they showed when they saw the punishment being carried out on their dirty faces, the rest of their expressions were numb and submissive. He let out a long sigh in his heart. It seemed that these people had been living under oppression for a long time. This group of supervisors was really ruthless. The disciple who was whipped on the stone pillar was already dead, but they still didn't let go of the corpse. They only stopped when the Wolf Fong whips had smashed the corpse into pieces. Yu Qianshou narrowed his eyes. A cold light flashed in his eyes. Could it be that they had a grudge against each other? They actually wanted to whip the corpse to vent their hatred. After that, the miners were chased back to their respective caves. Yu Qianshou was led to a place by the supervisor. The space wasn't big. There were only mattresses on the ground. There were already 3 people lying on the ground. It seemed that 4 people would have to squeeze together. The supervisor said coldly, "You will stay here. Sure, Xiaotian, tell him what to do next." The last sentence was said to a young man lying on the ground. When the young man called Sure Xiaotian heard the supervisor's words, he hurriedly got up and responded. The supervisor didn't say anything else and turned to leave. Sure Xiaotian's face was very dirty, but one could vaguely tell that he was a handsome young man. Of course, Yu Qianshou had also stayed in the cultivation world for a long time. He knew that one couldn't judge someone's age by their appearance. Sure Xiaotian's big eyes looked at this newcomer blankly. Yu Qianshou smiled at Sure Xiaotian in a friendly manner. However, Sure Xiaotian didn't seem to appreciate it. He only told Sure Xiaotian to follow him and didn't say anything else. He brought him to get the mining tools. The tools were very simple. A custom-made pickaxe and a basket that could be carried on one's back. After they were done, Sure Xiaotian slowly told him some of the rules and the two of them returned to the cave. Actually, Yu Qianshou really wanted to ask him what was the so-called magical equipment that could be checked. However, Sure, Xiaotian didn't answer any of his questions. The mining rules didn't sound difficult. He just didn't know how to do it. Each person had to hand in a high-grade spirit stone every day. In other words, you could take 100 middle-grade spirit stones or 10,000 low-grade spirit stones. If you couldn't complete the task, you couldn't rest or eat. For cultivators, this wasn't the most important thing. Even if you couldn't eat or rest for a day or two before reaching the core formation stage, it was fine. The worst part was that if you couldn't complete the task today, the difference would be double the next day. If you couldn't complete the task in 3 days, the punishment would be based on the difference. As for those who completed the task in excess, the excess could be accumulated until the next time you didn't complete the task. Alternatively, you could enjoy 1% of the excess spirit stones. The miner could choose between the two methods. If someone chose the latter, then you had a guarantee that you could complete the task every time. Otherwise, you would still be punished because your previous excess spirit stones had already been used up. The strictest rule was that if someone dared to steal spirit stones or secretly absorb spirit stones in the cave, they would be dead if they were discovered. As for these rules, Yu Qianshou remembered them. He wasn't worried about being punished for completing the task. Instead, he was thinking about how to steal spirit stones without being discovered while ensuring that he could complete the task. This way, he could continue to stay in the spirit stone cave and continue stealing. In his current situation, if he wanted to increase his cultivation level, he really needed spirit stones. Now that the opportunity was right in front of him, it was impossible for him not to steal. This was because his way of thinking was no different from his previous life. The principle that a horse wouldn't get fat without night grass and a man wouldn't get rich without a windfall was deeply engraved in his consciousness. What worried him the most was the magic tool that Gao Shiping mentioned. If he hid spirit stones in the golden bead, he didn't know if it would be discovered. The sound of snoring echoed in the cave, making Yu Qianshou very surprised. How could cultivators sleep so soundly? What was the difference between them and mortals? He couldn't figure it out. He really wanted to hide in the golden bead world, but he was afraid that someone would discover his sudden disappearance. He could only endure the 3 people's continuous snoring. The next day, Yu Qianshou discovered that everyone here was minding their own business. No one would pay attention to him. He imitated the 3 people, carrying a basket on his back and carrying a pickaxe. He followed them to the entrance of the spirit stone mine. He stood in the crowd and looked around, looking very different. Especially his clothes, which were many times cleaner than the others, were very eye-catching. Chapter 20. You, don't look around. I'm talking to you. Come here. The supervisor at the cave entrance pointed at Yu Qianshou and shouted rudely. Only then did the latter realize that the people in front of him had already gone in. He hurried over. The supervisor took out a bronze mirror and shone it at him. A white light flashed on the mirror. Could this be a magic tool? While he was still puzzled, the supervisor pushed him into the mine. You're dressed like a dog. Next. He heard the words of the supervisor behind him, but he didn't think much about it. He looked around the mine. It was pitch black. He really didn't know how to dig spirit stones in this kind of environment. He slowed down and walked in. After his eyes gradually adapted to the darkness, he heard the sound of several people running in. Gold ingots dropped in front? He really had to give it to them. They could even run in this kind of environment. While he was shaking his head, he suddenly noticed that there were sporadic lights on the walls around the mine. What was this? As he moved forward, there were more and more sporadic lights. They covered the 4 walls, even under his feet. It made him feel like he was walking on a starry avenue. When he got closer, he discovered that they were actually fluorites. They were obviously not installed by humans. They were naturally formed. This also explained why he could dig for spirit stones in the cave, even without any light. He stood at a few forks in the tunnel and was choosing which one to enter. Suddenly, another miner rushed into each of the forks in a hurry. Although he didn't know why, there must be a reason why everyone was so anxious. Thinking of this, he didn't hesitate anymore. He randomly picked a hole and quickly walked in. The mine was deep and low. The deeper he went, the more crossroads he found, like a spider web. This place was like a maze. He was really worried that if he went in too much, he wouldn't be able to get out. frowning. He shook his head and scolded himself for being stupid. Since the terrain was downward, when he wanted to go out, he just had to go to a higher place. He could already faintly hear the sound of people digging in many of the holes. He didn't know where to dig, so he picked a hole with a louder sound and went in. Ding, ding, ding. Hearing the sound, he turned a corner. There were several low-grade spirit stones on the ground, including a middle-grade one. A miner was waving his pick and digging with all his might. Huh, not bad, not bad. I've already gained something. Yu Qianqiu smiled enthusiastically. As he spoke, he put down the basket on his back. He held the pickaxe and looked around, looking for a place to start. The tinkling sound suddenly stopped. He turned around and saw that the miner was looking at him warily. He nodded and smiled again. Obviously, the miner did not welcome him. His smile was a little awkward. "Get out. I discovered this vein first," the miner said bluntly. Yu Qianqiu was a little angry. "Damn it. We're all miners, so why are you chasing me out?" However, he couldn't see through the other person's cultivation level. It was obvious that the other person's cultivation level was higher than his. A little impatience will spoil great plans. Even though he was unhappy, for the sake of his great cause of stealing spirit stones, he decided to swallow his anger. He rolled his eyes, picked up the basket, and walked out with a sullen face. What happened next was the same. In every small hole, there was a person digging. When they saw him, they would bluntly announce, "This is my territory, get out." What made him most discouraged was that almost everyone he saw had a higher cultivation level than him. He wanted to find someone to vent his anger, but there was no one to vent it on. Now he finally understood why those people ran after entering the mine. They were all afraid that the spirit stone vein they discovered last time would be taken by someone else, so they rushed to take over. In a fit of anger, he walked towards the deepest part of the mine. He didn't know how many years he had been digging, how long he had walked, and how many turns he had taken. Finally, he reached the end of the mine. "Damn it, there shouldn't be anyone chasing me out here." He cursed and put down the basket. He held the pickaxe in his hand and couldn't help but feel excited. In front of him was a dead end. It was as if he could see the spirit stones waving at him. He raised the pickaxe with both hands and started digging. Ding! Damn it! Yu Qianqiu screamed and threw the pickaxe to the side. He raised his numb hands and sighed. He shook his hands and picked up the pickaxe to test it on the surrounding walls. Ding, ding, ding. Everywhere was as hard as stone. No wonder the sound of digging sounded like blacksmithing. He was too impatient. He tried again and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. How was this digging? This was clearly digging a hole in a stone mountain. In the past, he really didn't know that spirit stones grew in such a place. The amount of spirit stones used by so many people in Ong Kwangsung depended on these people to dig them out bit by bit. Even though he heard that there were other spirit stone mines in other places, the miners there probably didn't have it easy either. He tried to inject chi into the pickaxe. Ding, ding, ding. Sure enough, it started digging. Yu Qianqiu was extremely excited. He swung his arms and dug with all his might. It was good to have enthusiasm for work, but not being able to produce results was often the most painful thing. He dug for a long time. Not to mention spirit stones, he didn't even see a single hair. With the continuous consumption of the qi in his body, he was unable to keep up with the expenditure. At this rate, he would die of exhaustion before he could dig up any spirit stones. He wasn't a reckless person. He immediately stopped and decided to figure out what the problem was. Based on the limited common sense from his previous life, the first thing he could confirm was that things such as gold and precious stones all had their own veins and directions. He believed that the same principle applied to spirit stones. The fluorite that could be found everywhere should be associated with spirit stones. This cobweb-like hole must have been dug by the miners in the past. If they stopped here, did it mean that there were no more spirit stones ahead? He didn't understand this point, so he couldn't make a judgment. He wanted to find someone to ask, but the miners here would probably get the same result. No one would tell him. What a headache. Damn it. Why am I so stupid? Yu Qianqiu slapped his forehead in annoyance. Sister Bai's Fox clan was an expert in digging holes. You should ask her. He carefully looked around. After confirming that there was no one, he picked up the tool and disappeared. Sister Bai, help. Yu Qianqiu, who returned to his own territory, shouted a few times, and stopped. A forest suddenly appeared in front of him. The bamboos were swaying, and a familiar melody came from the forest. If it wasn't for the purple chaos around him, he would have suspected that he had gone to the wrong place. He walked into the forest in doubt. A green and exquisite bamboo house appeared in front of him. The style was very retro. The bamboo house was surrounded by a bamboo fence. There was a small bamboo pavilion inside, and a beautiful woman in white was playing the zither and singing. Who else could it be if not the white fox? Yu Qianqiu, who was relieved, looked around again and smiled with satisfaction. Looking at the white fox playing the zither and singing, he couldn't help but admire it. As expected of an artist, its aesthetic standards were higher than ordinary people. The forest surrounded the bamboo forest, and the bamboo forest surrounded the bamboo house. The environment was quiet. He didn't expect that the thing he had thrown in a few days ago would be turned into this by the white fox in just a few days. The layout was appropriate and pleasing to the eye. He walked in with a smile. Although the white fox didn't even raise her head, with her late-stage tribulation passing stage cultivation, she would definitely know that he had come. Yu Qianqiu walked to the pavilion and called out, "Sister Bai." Unexpectedly, the white fox didn't pay attention to him. She didn't even raise her head. Yu Qianqiu's heart skipped a beat. She had a problem with him. He didn't know how he had offended her, but it wasn't a good thing. He was just about to ask her for help. Yu Qianqiu sat at the side with a mischievous smile. He stuck his head out and said, "Yo, whose beauty is playing the zither?" "Beauty, this young man greets you." Beauty, beauty, beauty. To be honest, after this younger brother left her here, she couldn't even see his shadow for a few days. It made her feel like she had just been released from captivity and was trapped again. How could she not be angry? However, she couldn't do anything about this shameless person. She ignored him, but he kept calling her beauty. The sound of the zither stopped. The white fox's face turned slightly red. She raised her head and said angrily, "Do you still remember that you have a sister like me? If you have the ability, then don't come back. Are you digging for spirit stones?" The last sentence was said when she saw the thing in Yu Qianqiu's hand. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. The white fox's words made him feel a little strange. It was like a wife who had been living alone at home for a few days and finally saw her dead husband. The thought flashed through his mind. He avoided the question and replied, "Sister's eyes are really sharp. You saw through it with one look." He then told the white fox about how he was punished to do hard labor in the spirit stone mine. However, he hid the fact that he had wronged Wu Baoru. This kind of feeling was understandable. No one would want to expose their despicable and shameless side to the public. He told the white fox that because he had offended sect leader Ong Kwangsung, and now that his master was dead, he was immediately attacked by the sect leader for revenge. He was sent to the spirit stone mine to do hard labor. If he couldn't complete the task, he would face severe punishment. A dignified sect leader is actually so narrow-minded. The white fox frowned. She stared at the smiling face in front of her and said, "You have the golden bead. If you want to escape, no one in Ong Kwangsung can stop you. Could it be that you are here to ask for my help?" "Huh, sister is wise. I haven't even said it, and you already know." Yu Qianqiu laughed. The white fox was slightly annoyed. She took out the mountain-piercing claw from her waist and threw it to him. Yu Qianqiu hugged the item and smiled from ear to ear. He stood up and was about to leave. He suddenly remembered something and asked, "At the entrance of the mine, I saw Ong Kwangsung's disciple holding a bronze mirror and shining it on my body. Sister, do you know what it's used for?" "It's just a very ordinary magic tool. It doesn't have much use. If someone secretly absorbs spiritual energy or hides spirit stones on their body, it's very easy to find out. All the big sects in the cultivation world use it in their spirit stone mines." "Why do you ask?" The white fox asked curiously. "It's nothing. Sister, if I put spirit stones in the golden bead with a magic tool, be able to find them?" Yu Qianqiu asked again. The white fox lightly shook her head and said, "It can't even find spirit stones in storage bags. I think it's even harder to find the space inside the golden bead." "Oh." Yu Qianqiu heaved a sigh of relief. He nodded and said, "I was worried to death. Since it can't be found, then I'm relieved. Sister, I'll leave first. Ah, you. The white fox was stunned. This bastard is probably asking this to steal spirit stones. If that's the case, wouldn't I be helping the evildoer? When she came back to her senses, she wanted to stop him and ask him questions, but he was already gone. Chapter 21. Yu Qianshou appeared in the mine and listened carefully. The surroundings were very quiet. He put down the pickaxe and put on the mountain-piercing claws. After infusing his true qi, the gloves immediately became one with his palms. The 10 sharp claws were dark and shiny, and he clawed at the wall. Swoosh! Stone chips flew. Didn't they say that the gloves could feel spiritual energy? Then let's try it. He pressed his claws on the wall. As soon as he calmed down, he felt that the gloves seemed to have an impulse to pull him to the left. Yu Qianshou's heart was beating fast. He really felt spiritual energy. His hands moved according to the feeling from the gloves. It was not until they moved 3 to 4 meters from their original position that they stopped. Although the distance it had moved wasn't far, it was still far from the direction he had intended to dig in. Right in front of him, he could clearly feel the spirit stones that he wanted to dig up. Yu Qianshou was very glad. If not for the gloves, no matter how fast he dug, it would be useless. Baby, I'm coming. Yu Qianshou shouted excitedly in his heart. His 10 claws moved, and he rushed at the stone wall in front of him. Swoosh, swoosh. There was no sound of clanking. It was like a sharp knife cutting through paper. The stone wall could not withstand a single blow and was destroyed in an instant. Not long after, a hole a few meters deep was dug. The feeling in front was also getting stronger and stronger, encouraging Yu Qianshou to move forward bravely. When he clawed down and saw a crystal white part of the stone wall, he could not help but cheer. Then he covered his mouth and laughed secretly. Finally, he dug out a spiritual stone. Suddenly, he remembered that his basket and pickaxe were still in the tunnel outside. He immediately went out and looked around to see that no one was around. He picked up the things and went back into the tunnel. After digging out the spiritual stone, he held it in his hand and looked at it carefully. This was the first time he found that the spiritual stone was so beautiful. It was crystal clear and cute no matter how he looked at it. Unfortunately, it was only a low-grade spiritual stone. He shook his head and threw the spiritual stone into the basket. Then he patted his head again. Not knowing what he thought, he picked up the pickaxe and the basket with the low-grade spiritual stone and threw them into space. If he continued to work hard, perhaps the superior spirit stones were just ahead. Now that he had an income, he was even more excited. He followed the feeling of mountain-piercing claw without stopping. Not long after, the occasional appearance of 1 or 2 spirit stones on the stone wall gradually increased to several spirit stones appearing at the same time. All of them were eagerly put into his own space by his fingers. Although they were all low grade, he did not reject any of them and did not waste any of the fruits of his labor. Holy shit! Great harvest, 1, 2, 3, 9, another 10 low-grade spirit stones. The 10 low-grade spirit stones that appeared at the same time disappeared one by one as he counted with his fingers. After digging nearly 100 pieces of low-grade spirit stones, a thick white crystal appeared in front of his eyes. It was exactly the same as the middle-grade spirit stone that his master had given him. Needless to say, the first mid-tier spirit stone was in his hands. As he continued to dig, Yu Qianshou became more and more excited. The density of the spirit stones was getting higher and higher. For every 100 low-grade spirit stones, he would find 1 mid-grade spirit stone. When he had dug out close to 100 mid-grade spirit stones, he suddenly felt something strange coming from his mountain-piercing claw. Could it be that high-grade spirit stones were about to appear? Slightly stunned, he immediately dug in that direction without any regard for his life. Of course, the correct judgment would not disappoint him. When a light golden spirit stone appeared on the stone wall, Yu Qianshou carefully dug it out. He took off the mountain-piercing claw and held it in his hand to carefully examine it. There was no doubt about it. This was a high-grade spirit stone. It was the first time he had seen a high-grade spirit stone. He had heard from his master that it was light golden in color. The light golden spirit stone was as beautiful as amber. Under the illumination of the fluorite, it exuded an enchanting luster. Looking at it, Yu Qianqiu was dazzled. Feeling the rich spiritual energy in the spirit stone in his hand, he really wanted to inhale it into his body, but he still controlled that impulse. Not for anything else, but for the increasing number of high-grade spirit stones. He swallowed his saliva and said, "You want me to hand over such a good thing? Oomph. Even if you beat me to death, I won't do it." The amber-like crystal disappeared in his hand. The white fox and the golden bead confirmed her guess. Sure enough, not long after Yu Qianqiu disappeared, spirit stones began to fall from the sky. They fell precisely in the courtyard and piled up into a small pile. She just shook her head. Those things were not tempting to her. For a person whose cultivation had reached the late stage of passing calamity, she had already reached the peak of the cultivation world. Spirit stones had no effect on her. Yu Qianqiu also discovered the rule of digging spirit stones. Every time he dug in a direction, the first spirit stone he dug would be a low-grade spirit stone. Every 100 low-grade spirit stones would be surrounded by a middle-grade spirit stone, and in nearly 100 such groups, there would only be one high-grade spirit stone. After knowing this rule, he was no longer interested in those low-grade spirit stones. It was a waste of time and not worth it. He directly dug out a high-grade spirit stone, which was equivalent to tens of thousands of low-grade spirit stones. Only when he was casually digging did he put the middle-grade and low-grade spirit stones into the space. Counting the time, almost a day had passed. Excluding the half of the day that was wasted, he estimated that he had dug out nearly 100 high-grade spirit stones, hundreds of middle-grade spirit stones, and thousands of low-grade spirit stones. His mood changed from excitement to disapproval. This was the psychological change from a poor person to a rich person. He probably didn't know that his income in the half of the day was equivalent to the output of this spirit stone mine in a day. This was naturally due to the contribution of the Fox clan's treasure, the mountain-piercing claw. For 3 consecutive days, he almost non-stop digging. He didn't hand in spirit stones every day like other people. The spirit stones in his hand were enough for him to hand in spirit stones for 3 days at a time. However, at the end of the second day, he felt a little hungry. After all, he hadn't reached the bearing essence stage yet. He went to the golden bead and roasted a pheasant to eat. Seeing the pile of spirit stones that almost filled half of the courtyard, he smiled very happily and sighed that his hard work was not in vain. However, the white fox warned him that if he dared to throw another spirit stone into the courtyard, she would take back the mountain-piercing claw. This threat was quite effective. After that, he threw all the spirit stones into the forest outside the courtyard. The deadline of 3 days was up. Yu Qianqiu came out carrying a basket full of spirit stones. At the entrance of the cave, there were more than 10 supervisors counting the spirit stones for the miners. He, who was at the back of the line, had to wait for a while before it was his turn. Just as he walked over, he heard someone say, "Let me see." He looked up and saw the fierce-looking Gao Shiping smiling at him. "Junior Marshal Brother Yu, I've been waiting for you to come out. I wonder how you finished the task." Gao Shiping said with a fake smile. This guy's attitude wasn't too friendly. Yu Qianqiu put the basket on the big table at the entrance of the cave and said with a smile, "It's my first time, so I'm not used to it. Fortunately, I managed to finish the task." A pile of spirit stones fell on the table, shining brightly. A trace of greed flashed in Gao Shiping's eyes, but it was quickly hidden. All of this fell into Yu Qianqiu's eyes. The corner of his mouth slightly curled up, revealing a trace of a smile. The former waved his hand, and 2 supervisors came over to count the spirit stones. "Senior Marshal Brother Gao, there's something I'd like to ask." Yu Qianqiu gestured for him to speak first. Gao Shiping frowned. He thought to himself, "I gave you some face, but you really opened a dye shop. I called you Junior Marshal Brother out of politeness, but you really dared to call me brother. Why don't you find out what kind of place this is?" Thinking of the 2 senior Marshal brothers' instructions, he could not offend them too much. Perhaps one day, when they returned to Ong Kwangsung and gain power, He might have to beg them for help. He walked to the side with a sullen face and said coldly, "Junior Marshal Brother, what's the matter? This is my first time here, so I'm afraid that I might have done something wrong. If I've offended you in any way, please forgive me." Yu Qianshou raised his hand and bowed to Gao Shiping. A faint gold color flashed in his hand. He looked around and saw that no one was paying attention to him. When he lowered his hand, the faint gold color slid into the latter's clothes. Gao Shiping saw the alluring faint gold color the moment Yu Qianshou raised his hand. He naturally knew what it was, but before he could react, it had already slipped into his clothes. Gao Shiping's body trembled, and his hand subconsciously pressed on the thing in his abdomen. His eyes flashed as he stared at Yu Qianshou. The temptation of a high-grade spirit stone was too great, and he was considering whether or not to accept it. As a core formation stage cultivator, he could only receive 25 middle-grade spirit stones every month. A high-grade spirit stone could last him for 4 months. Although he was the supervisor of the spirit stone mine, he had never dared to take a spirit stone from here. If someone found out, the consequences would be unthinkable, especially since there were 3 nascent soul stage elders guarding this place. Gao Shiping lowered his voice and said, "It's my duty to take care of Junior Brother, but Junior Brother was sent here by the Sect to do hard labor. If you can't complete the task, or do something you shouldn't do, I can't take care of you. After all, there are 3 elders here, and there are some things that I can't decide." Hearing the meaning behind his words, Gao Shiping could take care of him, but there were some things that he could take care of, and some things that he couldn't. For example, if he couldn't complete the task, or if he stole or absorbed spirit stones. Damn it! He had the heart of a thief, but no guts. Yu Qianshou rubbed his nose and patted Gao Shiping's hand that was pressing on his abdomen. He smiled and said, "Senior Brother, don't worry. I definitely won't do anything that would make things difficult for Senior Brother. I just want to live a little more freely here. I believe that this won't make things difficult for Senior Brother." Gao Shiping was still a little hesitant, and the supervisor shouted, "Yu Qianshou, the task is completed, and you have received 500 low-grade spirit stones. Come over and be inspected." "Senior Brother, don't worry," Yu Qianshou said softly and walked over. The supervisor took a bronze mirror and looked at it, and didn't find anything unusual. Gao Shiping, who had been watching the scene, let out a sigh of relief and shouted to the supervisor, "Watch it closely." After saying that, he walked over to Yu Qianshou and smiled. "Junior Brother, you got more than 500 low-grade spirit stones on your first mining trip. I've been here for so many years, and this is the first time I've seen something like this. I really admire you." He wasn't being polite. If he included the top-grade spirit stone that he collected, it would be 10,500 low-grade spirit stones. This was something that had never been seen among the newbies. Luck, pure luck. I just happened to come across a good vein," Yu Qianshou said modestly. The 2 of them chatted and laughed as they left, and the others looked at them in disbelief. Gao Shiping had always been secretly called Butcher Gao, and countless miners had died in his hands. When had they ever seen him being so nice to the miners? Chapter 22. Coincidentally, a supervisor passed by and saw this scene. He smiled and asked Gao Shiping, "Marshal Uncle, who is this? Sorry to trouble you to accompany us." Yu Qianshou turned his head to the side, as if he didn't hear anything. Gao Shiping's expression sank, and he shouted at the supervisor, "Don't be rude. This is your Yu Qianshou, sure shoe you. He only made a small mistake and was temporarily punished to work here. It won't be long before he goes back. How can you compare him to normal miners?" Marshal Uncle you. The supervisor smiled apologetically. His smile was a little insincere as he muttered in his heart, "So it's at Yu Qianshou who offended the sect leader. If even this is a small mistake, then most of the miners here can be considered as sinners. Junior Brother, don't take his words to heart. Come, let's have a drink at my place." Gao Shiping invited. Yu Qianshou cupped his hands and smiled. "Then I'll do as you say." The 2 of them laughed and walked towards the supervisor's residence with their arms around each other's shoulders. They immediately attracted the attention of many people, especially some of the miners, whose eyes were filled with envy. The days of the supervisor were very comfortable. With a command, good wine and dishes were quickly placed on the table in the refreshing wooden house. The two of them were in a good mood and frequently raised their cups, drinking happily. Of course, there was a reason why the miners could rest for one day every 3 days. It was because the labor intensity of mining was too high and most of the miners' cultivation was below the foundation establishment stage. If they didn't rest, they would probably die from exhaustion before long. This type of work wasn't something a normal person could do. If it was a normal person, they probably wouldn't be able to dig more than a few pieces in a day. Naturally, resting was one of the ways to ensure the amount of mining. Before they left the table, Yu Qianqiu burped and said, "Speaking of which, it's quite a coincidence. Before I entered the sect, I was quite knowledgeable in the way of mining. If senior brother Gao trusts me, on the last day of every 3 days, please continue to guard the cave for me." How could Gao Shiping not understand the meaning behind this? His eyes immediately lit up. The two of them laughed heartily and confided in each other. In the end, Gao Shiping insisted on sending him off, and Yu Qianqiu found it hard to refuse his kindness. In the end, Gao Shiping sent Yu Qianqiu directly to his cave. Butcher Gao's arrival scared the other 3 people in the cave so much that they quickly got up. The two of them exhaled the smell of alcohol and called each other affectionately. It was really enviable for others. Looking at his junior brother's living environment, Gao Shiping frowned. He patted his chest and promised, "Junior brother, please bear with it for now. Tomorrow, I'll find a clean place to stay. Leave this matter to me." After Butcher Gao came, the way the 3 of them looked at Yu Qianqiu changed greatly. They became much more reserved, and they no longer dared to touch his buttocks. Yu Qianqiu understood what was going on. He looked at the 3 of them and noticed a bloody wound on Shi Xiaoyan's back. Clearly, he was whipped by the wolf Fong whip. He couldn't help but ask, "Shi Xiaotian, what happened to your back?" Hearing him called, Shi Xiaotian quickly got up and replied to his martial uncle. After seeing the relationship between Yu Qianqiu and the Lord Warden, he didn't dare to act like he did before. It turned out that Shi Xiaotian was still short of 100 low-grade spirit stones for this mission. According to the rules, he had to be whipped by the wolf Fong whip. This injury was a punishment. Seeing him speak, Yu Qianqiu asked a few more questions. Shi Xiaotian answered them one by one. Speaking of which, Shi Xiaotian was quite unlucky. His family was originally a noble in the Huaxia Empire. Because of his good innate talent, he was fancied by a certain core formation stage cultivator in Kwangtsung, who wanted to take him as a disciple. In the Huaxia Empire, cultivation was a blessing that could only be encountered by chance. Naturally, his family happily agreed to take him as a disciple. Therefore, Shi Xiaotian went to Kwangtsung. With his good innate talent, he reached the 4th level of the Qi refining stage in the 1st year. However, in the 2nd year, his master was killed by someone at the foot of the mountain. The worst thing was that he and the grandson of an elder fell in love with a female disciple at the same time. They were youngsters. It was inevitable that they would fight for a woman's affection. In the end, they angered an elder and were kicked here. When Yu Qianqiu heard that his master was also dead, he couldn't help but look at him a few more times. When he talked about fighting for a woman, he couldn't help but laugh. When he looked at Shi Xiaotian again, he felt a sense of sympathy. Therefore, he wanted to help him. "Tomorrow, you and I will go dig for spirit stones together." After speaking, Yu Qianqiu sat cross-legged and closed his eyes. Shi Xiaotian was stunned. Although he was unwilling, he didn't dare to say anything. Until many years later, when he thought back to that night, he couldn't help but lament that fate played a huge joke on him. From that night onwards, his fate took a complete turn. The next day, Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting cross-legged and meditating, fell asleep at some point. In his dream, he was intimate with a certain someone who was bathing in the forbidden area. He probably heard the story of Shi Xiaoyan's jealousy and dreamed of it at night. Otherwise, How could the fairy sister he hadn't dreamed of for a long time appear again? When he woke up with a yawn, the sun was already high in the sky. Wiping away the saliva at the corner of his mouth, Sure Xiaoyan's dirty face couldn't hide the anxiety in front of him. Looking at the other two people in the cave, Yu Qianshou smiled in satisfaction. He would never mistreat those who listened to him. "Martial uncle, you're awake. It's almost noon. Let's hurry." In fact, Sure Xiaotian had wanted to leave long ago. If it wasn't for the relationship between Yu Qianshou and Gao Tofu, he wouldn't have seen him now. Looking at the two sets of mining tools in front of him, Yu Qianshou grunted and walked out empty-handed. Sure Xiaotian picked up the two baskets and followed. Although Yu Qianshou didn't say anything, he nodded in his heart. If Sure Xiaotian didn't even know how to look at things, then he wouldn't be worth his help. The area around the Spirit Stone mine had long since become empty. Apart from some guards, only a few people could be seen at the entrance of the mine. "Junior brother, you really made me wait." Gao Shiping, who was at the entrance, laughed when he saw the two people walking over. Yu Qianshou also waved his hand, walked over, and said with a smile, "I don't dare to trouble senior brother. It's just that I drank too much yesterday, and I'm a little tired, so I overslept." "This is?" Gao Shiping looked at Sure Xiaotian, who was behind him, and asked in confusion. Yu Qianshou sighed. "There's strength in numbers. I've specially found someone to help me. I believe we'll be more confident in completing the task." "Huh. I believe in Junior Brother's ability, and you definitely won't disappoint me." Perhaps only Yu Qianshou could understand the deeper meaning behind Gao Shiping's words. Gao Shiping then took out something wrapped in a banana leaf and said, "Junior Brother, you'll probably be in there for another 3 days. This is some food. Junior Brother, bring it in to eat." Smelling the aroma of meat, Yu Qianshou accepted it with thanks. The other supervisors' eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Since when did Butcher Gao become so meticulous? Some even suspected that the two of them had homosexual fetishes. The other supervisors also addressed them as Martial Uncle Yu affectionately. After inspecting the two late miners, they let them into the cave. Even Sure Xiaotian benefited a lot from following behind him, and the cold and emotionless Butcher Gao actually nodded and smiled at him. This was really something that only happened once in 1,000 years. Yu Qianshou slowly walked towards the deepest part of the mine. Sure Xiaotian followed behind him, wishing he could give him a kick. Half of the day had already passed, and he was still so calm. Yu Qianshou walked all the way to the entrance of the cave that they dug yesterday. He smiled and said, "You didn't eat anything this morning, right? It's all my fault for oversleeping. Come, eat something first. You'll have the strength to work when you're full." As he spoke, he opened the banana leaf and revealed a big pile of fragrant, golden yellow barbecued meat. He tore off half of it and handed it to Sure Xiaotian. Yu Qianshou took a bite. The taste was really not bad. He was started to like Gao Shiping, who was willing to work hard after receiving money. He was not like some people in his previous life who did not do anything after receiving money. He hated those people the most. Just as he was enjoying his meal, he suddenly heard someone crying. He saw Sure Xiaotian holding the large piece of barbecued meat and crying. Yu Qianshou was taken aback. He asked curiously, "Why are you crying?" "Martial uncle, little Tian has not eaten meat for a long time. Little Tian is homesick." Sure Xiaotian wiped his tears and sobbed. "What a child." Yu Qianshou swallowed the meat in his mouth and said, "Damn, I was wondering what you were doing. You're crying like a girl. Hurry up and eat. We'll work after eating." Therefore, the two of them squatted in the deepest part of the mine, hugging the barbecued meat and gnawing on it. The sound of chewing echoed. After eating, Sure Xiaotian patted his stomach happily. Yu Qianshou asked him to take his tools and brought him into the cave that he had dug. When Sure Xiaotian saw the exposed spirit stones all around the cave walls, his eyes immediately widened in disbelief. It was obvious that someone had dug this cave before, but why were the spirit stones right in front of him left untouched? Of course, he did not know that these were leftovers from Yu Qianshou's digging. He was too lazy to pick them up. Yu Qianshou pointed deep into the cave and said, "I found this. There are more in there, Just like here, there are exposed spirit stones. Just a few of them will be enough for us to finish our mission for 3 days. Little Tion, I asked you to dig enough for 2 people for 3 days. Will you do it? Sure Xiaotian nodded excitedly and said, Don't worry, Martial Uncle. You can rest at the side and leave it to me. It won't take much effort to dig these spirit stones. Damn it, do you think I brought you here to slack off? Yu Qianqiu was in a bad mood after being misunderstood. The muscles on his face twitched as he explained, I didn't leave this place to you to rest. I'm going to look for a better vein of, or we can't just ignore what happened today and ignore the future. Hearing that Yu Qianqiu was going to find a better mine, Shi Xiaotian immediately patted his chest and said, Don't worry, Martial Uncle. Leave his place to me. Why did it sound like he was comforting someone who was about to die? Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and said, Don't go out for the next 3 days. Don't worry and dig here. I'll bring you something to eat. Remember to dig it clean. Don't waste the exposed spirit stones. After Shi Xiaotian agreed, he was too lazy to say anything else. He turned around and went to find a good place to dig for spirit stones. Chapter 23. The next day, Yu Qianqiu, who had a bountiful harvest, found Shi Xiaotian with 2 roasted hares. He saw that Shi Xiaotian was grinning from ear to ear and was happily digging. The 2 baskets were filled to the brim, and there was a big pile on the ground. Yu Qianqiu was shocked. He looked at where he dug and asked, I think we've only dug 1/3 of the place. There's already so much. Shi Xiaotian smiled and said, Uncle Master found a great place. We've dug enough to hand in 7 or 8 times. It's just that it's not easy to transport so many spirit stones. Yu Qianqiu didn't expect to miss so many spirit stones. He said in a deep voice, We can't hand them over all at once. We have to hide the rest for a rainy day. I found a good vein. Uncle Master really found a good vein. That's enough for us to dig for a long time. Shi Xiaotian jumped in joy. Eat something first. Yu Qianqiu passed a roasted hare to Shi Xiaotian. While eating, he said, Later, I will find a place to hide these spirit stones. Then he looked at Shi Xiaotian's reaction. If the latter showed even the slightest bit of hesitation, he would have to reconsider their future cooperation. To his satisfaction, Shi Xiaotian bit the hare and said without hesitation, I'll follow Uncle Master's decision. In fact, Shi Xiaotian's thinking was simple. The spirit stones here save time and effort. Uncle Master could even bring him to such a good place. What was there not to trust? Moreover, he could bring food in at any time. He could be considered to be very capable here. Good. Yu Qianqiu praised and said, Don't call me Uncle Master in the future. It's making me old. That's not good, right? Shi Xiaotian let go of the hare. In this era where the hierarchy was strict, how could one not know one's seniority? Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said, There's nothing bad about it. All right, then what should I call Uncle Master? Hee. The corners of Yu Qianqiu's mouth curled up slightly, but the smile froze on his face. Then, he sighed with a pair of confused eyes. Call me Boss. Boss. Sure, Xiaotian muttered to himself. Why does it feel like a secular gang name? Yes, just call me Boss. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up as he stared at him and said, Little Tion, as long as you follow me wholeheartedly, I guarantee that you'll have a good life in the future, and I'll even bring you home. Shi Xiaotian, who felt that his future was bleak, seemed to have no other choice. He nodded and said, I'll follow you, Boss. Quack. Just you wait. Cultivation world. I Huhan San and back. Yu Qianqiu laughed maniacally. That boss really made him feel good all over. Shi Xiaotian was stunned. Boss, who's Huhan San? Yu Qianqiu smiled sheepishly. He's also a boss. After you finish eating, continue digging. I'll find a place to hide the spirit stones. The place he was talking about was naturally inside the golden bead. After 3 days, Gao Shiping, who was at the entrance of the cave, saw the 2 of them with a smile on his face. Yu Qianqiu secretly stuffed another high-grade spirit stone into his hand. The former was overjoyed. Sect leader Ong Kwangsung only got 1 high-grade spirit stone a month, but Gao Shiping got one every 4 days. At this rate, it would be amazing. That's strange. The supervisor who counted the spirit stones for Yu Qianqiu and Xiao Tian muttered. Gao Shiping, who was chatting with Yu Qianqiu, suddenly shivered. He turned around and asked, "What's wrong?" The supervisor replied, "The two of them have collected so many middle-grade and low-grade spirit stones. How could there not be a single high-grade spirit stone? Logically speaking, it's not possible. This is really strange." Yu Qianqiu, who had a guilty conscience, was also slightly surprised. When he heard that it was this question, he heaved a sigh of relief. He glanced at Gao Shiping meaningfully. Gao Shiping almost fainted. He thought to himself, "I thought it was something serious. He gave me the high-grade spirit stone. How could you see it from there? This guy is too meddlesome. Looks like he needs to adjust." He then shouted, "What kind of spirit stone you get is a matter of luck. If you have any objections, I can let you have a taste of mining. I only have one question for you. Have they completed their task?" When a supervisor heard that he was asked to mine, he immediately shivered. He quickly replied, Completed. Both of them exceeded their quota." Gao Shiping snorted coldly. When Yu Qianqiu and Xiao Tian were done checking, he pulled them out for a drink. The supervisor was so scared that he was in a trance for a long time. In a wooden hut, wine and dishes were already prepared. Gao Shiping smiled and said, "Junior Marshall Brothers' place is too dark and damp. This place is for you to stay temporarily. Come, let's drink." Yu Qianqiu did not stand on ceremony. After thanking Gao Shiping, he raised his cup and drank with him. Xiao Tian, who was at the side, ate and drank at the same time. He thought to himself that he had really followed the right person. There were so many delicious dishes that he did not even dare to think about in the past. He kept pouring wine for the two of them. After eating and drinking, Gao Shiping left. Yu Qianqiu asked Xiao Tian to stay with him. He did not let him return to that lousy cave. Xiao Tian was so touched that his eyes were brimming with tears. Yu Qianqiu only said one thing: "Work hard with me. Good days are still ahead." After saying that, he changed into a set of clean clothes that Gao Shiping left behind. He moved out a chair and picked some wildflowers. He lay outside and basked in the sun. Smelling the fragrance of the flowers, he soon fell asleep with the smell of alcohol in his mouth. Wu Baoru woke up, but he was still ill. It should be known that it was not easy for cultivators to fall sick. The higher one's cultivation, the less likely it was for them to fall sick. However, he was so angry that he fell sick. His senior and junior brothers naturally knew the ins and outs of what happened that day. They did not know whether to laugh or cry, and scolded Yu Qianqiu for being a scoundrel. At this moment, another accident happened. It turned out that Wu Baoru, who was still ill, could not be angry. The moment he got out of bed, he heard many disciples discussing his despicable and shameless behavior. They were all talking about how he bullied Yu Qianqiu. The rumors spread like wildfire. Wu Baoru was so angry that he vomited blood on the spot and fainted again. When he woke up, he shouted that he wanted to kill Yu Qianqiu. However, no one would let him do that, because Lu Changqing had already made arrangements. What kind of place was the Spirit Stone Mine? As the Sect master of Ong Quang Tsung, how could Lu Changqing not know that the reason he sent Yu Qianqiu there was to make him suffer a little? When he could not stand it anymore, he would naturally be able to get the secret easily. Lu Wanwan was one of the elders of Ong Quang Tsung. Today, he was entrusted by the Sect master to look for Yu Qianqiu at the Spirit Stone Mine. Before he left, he brought a few outstanding disciples and grand disciples with the purpose of letting everyone gain experience. Among them was Yu Qianqiu's fairy sister, Chu Ping. Hearing the news, Gao Shiping hurriedly used his qi to dispel the smell of alcohol and hurriedly welcomed them. Lu Wanwan did not reveal the main purpose of this trip. He only told him to bring his disciples to gain experience. Gao Shiping, who thought that the elders were here to inspect the work, heaved a sigh of relief. He immediately nodded and bowed as he personally led everyone to explain. When they saw the few sets of torture tools in the mine, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air, especially when they saw the legendary Wolfong whips of the Spirit Stone Mine. The ferocious barbs on the whips were frightening. Anyone could see that the dark red color on the whip was dyed with blood. At the side, Chu Ping could not help but ask, "Martial Uncle Gao, will the newcomers also suffer from this whipping?" Gao Shiping did not know why she asked such a question. He laughed and said, "Very few newcomers can complete the task. Most of them will not be able to escape this calamity." After saying that, he led everyone to the miner's residence. In the dark and damp cave, a few miners huddled together and were sleeping on the ground. When Gao Shiping walked to almost every cave, he shouted, "Wake up!" The sleeping miners immediately jumped up as if it was a conditioned reflex. They stood together, trembling with fear, not daring to make sound. Looking at these skinny, dirty miners with tattered clothes, everyone could not help but sigh. Compared to Mount Qingguang, this place was simply hell on earth. They were all Ong Kwangsung disciples, but they did not expect the disparity to be so big. They all thought, in the future, we must not end up like this. Lu Wanwan's purpose for coming here was to find Yu Qianshou. Therefore, he patiently followed everyone to look at the caves one by one. In the end, after looking at all the caves, he did not see Yu Qianshou. Instead, he saw many familiar faces. Although they were all disciples of the younger generation, they had all treated him with great respect. Now that they had become like this, he could not help but feel somewhat rueful. Chu Ping also had the same goal. She wanted to see how the scholar was doing, but she was also afraid of seeing an unsightly and miserable sight. She could not tell what kind of mentality she was in. In the end, she did not see anything. She could not help but become even more worried. She thought, it said that people dying in spirit stone mines is a very common thing. Could it be that he also, Martial Nephew Gao, are all the miners here? Lu Wanwan had some doubts in his heart and asked with a frown. Gao Shiping said respectfully, "Martial Uncle, you know that some of the disciples have been taken care of by certain sect elders. Naturally, it is not good to leave them here. If Martial Uncle wants to see them, please follow me." Seeing Lu Wanwan nod his head in agreement, Gao Shiping led everyone toward a row of wooden houses on the opposite side of the hill. Just as they walked up the hill, everyone smelled a strong smell of alcohol. Lu Wanwan turned his head to look and saw a young disciple sleeping soundly on a reclining chair while basking in the sun. He could not help but frown and ask, "What's going on?" Actually, when Gao Shiping walked up the hill, he discovered Yu Qianshou, who was basking in the sun. He was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat and thought, "My ancestor, didn't he change a good place for you to sleep? Of all places to sleep, you had to sleep here. This time I'm going to die because of you." Hearing Lu Wanwan's words, he hurriedly ran over and shouted, "Junior Martial Brother Yu, Junior Martial Brother Yu, hurry up and wake up. The sect elders are here." Yu Qianshou was sleeping soundly. He turned around and was unwilling to get up. Suddenly, he heard someone say that the sect elders were here. In his mind, he immediately thought of Wu Baoru and immediately had the urge to touch a brick. Unfortunately, he did not feel anything. He immediately jumped up and shouted with sleepy eyes, "Damn it! Lingering around like a ghost. Where is he? Where is he? My ancestor, please have mercy with your mouth." Gao Shiping almost shouted out loud. He hurriedly pulled him and said, "Junior Martial Brother, stop shouting. He's right here." Chapter 24. It's Martial Uncle Yu. The disciples looked at each other. This was beyond everyone's expectations. Logically speaking, Yu Qianshou should have been punished to do hard labor, and his fate should have been similar to those miners. At this moment, Yu Qianshou's clothes were bright, and his mouth was glistening with oil. His body reeked of alcohol, and there were a few flowers in his hair. He looked like he had just woken up, and it was obvious that he was living a comfortable life. Martial Uncle Lu. When Yu Qianshou saw that it was Lu Wanwan and not Wu Baoru, he smiled and walked over to greet him. The flowers in his hair swayed as he walked, and it was very conspicuous. The disciples couldn't help but laugh. Gao Shiping didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Junior apprentice brother, pluck the flowers from your hair." "Oh, Yu Qianqiu touched his head and realized that the flower he had placed on his head before he fell asleep was still on his head. He smiled awkwardly and threw it away. He then walked in front of Lu Wanwan and said with a sullen face, "Martial Uncle Lu, please help me ask, when can I go back? This is really not a place for people to stay. I really can't stand it anymore." Lu Wanwan snorted. "Can't stand it? I don't think I've seen anyone sleeping in broad daylight on Mount Qingguang." As he said this, he coldly stared at Gao Shiping and asked, "Doesn't he need to do hard labor? Didn't the law enforcement disciples tell you when they sent him here? This disciple doesn't dare." Gao Shiping cursed all 18 generations of Yu Qianqiu's ancestors in his heart, and hurriedly replied, "Junior apprentice brother, Yu works the same as all the miners. Every day, he exceeds his quota. If martial uncle doesn't believe it, you can check the accounts of the other supervising disciples." Lu Wanwan naturally didn't believe it. He had been in Kuangsung for so many years, and naturally knew a thing or two about the situation of a spirit stone mine. He had never heard of anyone who could exceed their quota every day. After calling the disciple in charge of the mining accounts, Lu Wanwan was speechless after seeing the accounts. At this moment, Shi Xiaotian, who was sleeping, heard the commotion and ran out. When he saw everyone, he immediately stood there, not daring to move. Yu Qianqiu didn't care so much. He noticed Chu Pinger and couldn't help but think of her fair skin when she took off her clothes that day. His eyes couldn't help but glance at her curvaceous body a few times. At this moment, he was the center of attention, and Chu Ping was naturally looking at him as well. Seeing that he was unscrupulously looking at places he shouldn't be looking at, her face flushed red, and she angrily said in her heart, "This person is obviously a peerless talent, but why does he always pretend to be a lowly person to hide his true colors? Does he think I don't know?" Ever since she found out that those two songs were made by Yu Qianqiu, she had always thought that he was deliberately putting on an unrestrained front. A mischievous and pretty female disciple beside Chu Pinger suddenly burst into laughter. It immediately attracted everyone's attention. Yu Qianqiu praised in his heart. Although she was not as good-looking as the fairy sister, she was still a beautiful girl. "Not bad, not bad." Lu Wanwan frowned and lightly shouted, "Xiao'er." However, the pretty female disciple didn't seem to be afraid of him at all. She pouted and said, "Grandpa, I just saw Shiji Chu Pinger blushing under Shi Shuyu's gaze, so I couldn't help but laugh." This person turned out to be Lu Wanwan's biological granddaughter, Lu Xiao'er. Look at what she said. Everyone's eyes immediately turned to the two of them. Chu Pinger's face became even redder, and she lightly pinched Lu Xiao'er. "Misunderstanding, misunderstanding." Yu Qianqiu smiled awkwardly. Suddenly, he was stunned and stared at Chu Pinger and said in surprise, "You are Chu Pinger?" Chu Pinger nodded lightly. Lu Xiao'er giggled and said, "Why? You must have heard of my Shiji's name. The two songs that Shiji composed are famous in the whole of Kuangsung." Seeing that the topic had changed, Gao Shiping, who was eager to hear it, also said in surprise, "So you are Shiji Chu Ping? I have also heard of Shiji's talent here. I wonder when I will have a chance to listen to Shiji sing those two songs." Hearing this, even Lu Wanwan sighed and said, "This is not nonsense. Chu Pinger can really be considered as the most talented woman in Kuangsung. The two songs that she composed are really the best in the world." "Two songs?" Yu Qianqiu looked at Gao Shiping suspiciously, and then looked at Chu Pinger. He seemed to have heard that the latter could sing White Fox. "What was the other song?" Lu Xiao'er looked at Yu Qianqiu with her hands behind her back, as if she was looking at an antique. She shook her head and said, "It seems that Shiji is really ignorant. Haven't you heard of our Kuangsung's 1,000 years of unrequited love? This song is now circulating in the whole cultivation world. 1,000 years of unrequited love." Yu Qianqiu murmured, then shook his head, indicating that he had never heard of it. Chu Pinger's face was so red that she wanted to find a hole to hide in. She kept pulling Lu Xiao'er to prevent her from speaking, but the latter said arrogantly, "Hey, Shiji, if you have never heard of this Then have you heard of Mandarin Duck and Butterfly Dream? What did you say? Yu Qianqiu suddenly let out a strange cry. Mandarin Duck and Butterfly Dream. Have you never heard of it? Lu Xiaoder pouted and repeated it again. She was almost despising Yu Qianqiu to the ends of the earth. Now, Yu Qianqiu was 100% sure that his song had been plagiarized. The strange thing was, when did the song Mandarin Ducks and Butterflies in a Dream spread out? Even if he said that he had sung it, no one would believe him even if he was beaten to death. Forget it. Yu Qianqiu looked at Chu Ping'er with a sad look. She probably didn't know that it was him. He shook his head and said with a bitter smile, "It seems that I am really ignorant." "Oomph. It is true." Lu Xiaoder rolled her eyes and added, "Damn, vomiting blood." Yu Qianqiu looked at the sky speechlessly. "Everyone, listen to me." Chu Ping'er shouted and stood out with a red face. "I have said many times that these two songs were not written by me, but you all didn't believe me. Actually, this song was written by Shiji Yu." "What? It was him. It can't be, right? Say it again." Everyone at the scene was stunned, wondering if they had heard wrongly. Everyone looked at Yu Qianqiu, whose mouth was covered in grease after eating the meat. How could he write such a song with his appearance? Not to mention them. Even Yu Qianqiu couldn't believe it himself. What he couldn't believe was how Chu Ping'er knew that he was the one who wrote it. "Senior Chu, you said that those two songs were written by Shiji Yu? Did I hear wrongly?" Lu Xiaoder's eyes widened. Then she stared at Yu Qianqiu and said, "Tell me, is it true?" Everyone stared at him as if they wanted to eat him alive. Yu Qianqiu suddenly felt that something was wrong. He decided that he would not admit it even if he was beaten to death. He hurriedly waved his hand and said, "How is that possible? Shiji Chu, please don't joke around. I don't even know how to sing. How could I have written a song?" Everyone felt that what he said made sense. They looked at Chu Ping'er, wondering why she said that. Sigh. Shiji has always been low-key. He hid his cultivation level and his talent. I know that Shiji is not a person who likes to show off, so when people asked me, I didn't say who Shiji was. In the end, everyone thought that I was the one who wrote those two songs, which made me feel helpless. Now that Shiji is right in front of me, does Shiji still want Chu Ping'er to lie in front of everyone? In the stone cave in the forbidden area, Shiji wrote a song with every step. Chu Ping'er saw such amazing talent with her own eyes. How could it be wrong? Does Shiji still want to deny it? Chu Ping'er said with fascination. "Ah." Yu Qianqiu was stunned. "You heard the song I sang in the stone cave in the forbidden area? How is that possible? When I taught it to the white fox, she was alone." Speaking up to this point, he suddenly realized that he had let the cat out of the bag. "Ah." Everyone screamed and looked at Yu Qianqiu in disbelief. If he still couldn't tell who was lying, he would really be an idiot. Chu Ping'er smiled sweetly and said, "Shiji, please don't blame me for eavesdropping. I heard it unintentionally, but Shiji's heavenly voice made Ping'er unable to move an inch. That's why I silently memorized it and sang it. I didn't expect other Shiji and Shimmy to hear it and sing it. Please forgive me, Shiji." "So that's how it is. No wonder," Yu Qianqiu murmured. Suddenly he said, "But I didn't have 1,000 years of unrequited love. I'm a fox that is cultivated for 1,000 years. Shiji, don't you remember? I heard it from the woman in the stone pavilion. I don't know what name Shiji came up with. Just the name Dream of Mandarin Ducks and Butterflies is so fascinating. Only Shiji could come up with such a name." Ping'er wouldn't dare to give Shiji's heavenly voice a title. The so-called 1,000 years of unrequited love was just something my Shiji and Shimmy came up with. Now, I would like to ask Shiji to tell me the name of the song. Ping'er will be very grateful. Chu Ping'er bowed politely. Yu Qianqiu's heart thumped wildly when he saw that gesture. He couldn't help but think of the day when he took off all his clothes. He thought to himself that since he had been discovered, he might as well pretend to be a gentleman in front of a beauty. Thus, he placed his hands behind his back and turned to look at the horizon. He sighed and said slowly with a hoarse voice, "Forget it. Forget it. I didn't expect to be discovered. I accidentally overheard my master talking about the woman in the cave. When I saw her, I was inspired and wrote a song for her. The title of the song didn't have any other meaning. I just called it White Fox. That's right. As for the second song, I saw that she was always depressed and wanted to comfort her. Thus, I wrote a song for her, Dream of Mandarin Ducks and Butterflies for her. Shirji Chu, do you have any questions? His words and actions had suddenly taken a 360-degree turn. It was hard for everyone to accept. Chu Pinger shook her head and said softly, White Fox. So it's called White Fox. It's elegant and not pretentious. It adds the finishing touch to the song. It's a good name. It's much better than the vulgar 1,000 years of unrequited love. Shirji's talent is shocking. Pinger admires it greatly. I just don't know when I'll be able to hear Shirji's masterpiece again. Damn it, that's fine too. Yu Qianshou had nothing else to say. He could only wave his hand with his back facing her. As for this matter regarding art, the others didn't seem to understand it. Hearing Chu Pinger's words, it seemed to be true. When they looked at Yu Qianshou again, it was as if they were looking at a high mountain, although they could only see his back. Everyone was stunned. Oh my, boss is amazing. Shi Xiaodian looked at his boss with admiration. Gao Shiping did the same. Even Lu Wanwan took a long time to regain his composure. He said, could it be that the woman you were talking about in the Forbidden Cave is the White Fox spirit imprisoned in the pavilion? Chu Pinger nodded. Apart from the three of them, no one else knew what the White Fox was. Lu Xiaoter immediately pestered Chu Pinger to ask what was going on. Chu Pinger slowly told her a sad and touching love story. The female disciples heard it and burst into tears. When Lu Wanxian saw his granddaughter sobbing, he immediately came to his senses and recalled the mission he had come here for. His face immediately sank, and he shouted coldly, Yu Qianshou, come with me. I have something to ask you. Chapter 25. What he wanted to ask was naturally related to the secret. The two of them stood far away. No one knew what they were talking about. They only saw Lu Wanwan pointing at Yu Qianshou and scolding him, who was scared like a chicken. When the two of them came back one after another, Lu Wanwan's face was not good. Obviously, he was angry, and Yu Qianshou was dejected, as if he had been greatly wronged. It made people wonder what the former had done to the latter. In fact, it was nothing. Lu Wanwan made it clear and directly asked him for the secret. Yu Qianshou denied it and insisted that there was no secret. He only said that his master often gave him some elixirs in the past, and he really didn't know the secret. He made up his mind. Since they said there was a secret, he would blame everything on his dead master. You want to know? You can ask my master. After learning the truth from Wu Baoru, Lu Wanwan had already regarded Yu Qianshou as a scoundrel. Naturally, he didn't believe what he said. After asking for a long time, he still didn't get the reason. Lu Wanwan was so angry that he shouted. In the end, he even threatened Yu Qianshou, but Yu Qianshou still insisted that he didn't know. Lu Wanwan said, You won't tell me, right? You will tell me when you are obedient. The two of them parted on bad terms. Then, he pulled Gao Shiping aside to talk to him with a sullen face. Everyone could see that the atmosphere was a little strange. His granddaughter Lu Xiao'er, however, opened her big eyes carefreely and pestered Yu Qianshou, asking him to write a song for her. Yu Qianshou glanced at Lu Xiao'er's exquisite figure that was already beginning to take shape. He cursed the old man in his heart for being so arrogant. If one day you make me angry, I'll make your granddaughter pregnant. Let's see if you can still be so arrogant then. But on the surface, he still pretended to be lost. He smiled bitterly and said, Why should I write a song? It's still unknown whether I can live past this year. Chu Ping, and others were shocked when they heard this. Lu Xiao'er asked, Martial uncle, what's wrong? What's wrong? Yu Qianshou forced a smile and said in a desolate tone, It's a pity that my teacher died early, and there's no one to protect him. Now that I've offended Elder Wu, I'm afraid that even the Sect's elders will want to kill me. Today, your grandfather came here on behalf of the Sect leader to make me plead guilty and submit to the law. They looked at each other and thought to themselves, No wonder Elder Lu brought us here today. I thought he really wanted to broaden our horizons. Nonsense. My grandpa is not that kind of person. Lu Xia defended her grandpa. Sigh. Whether it was nonsense or truth, it didn't matter. Does it mean anything to me? What's in it for me to lie to you? Yu Qianzhou's expression was bleak and bitter. Everyone was speechless. Suddenly, Yu Qianzhou's eyes lit up and he said emotionally, "If I, Yu Qianzhou, am really guilty as a man, I will take responsibility for what I've done. Your grandpa doesn't need to say anything, and I will kill myself here to apologize to the world. But I'm innocent, so how am I supposed to plead guilty? Although my master is dead, if you want me to compromise, I absolutely can't do it. I'd rather die standing than live kneeling." His words were firm and resolute, and his imposing manner was even more awe-inspiring. Everyone who heard him felt deep veneration. Even Lu Xia believed his words and lowered her head sadly. Lu Wanwan and Gao Shiping came back. The former glanced at Yu Qianzhou and sneered, while the latter shook his head helplessly. Yu Qianzhou looked at Gao Shiping and said with a faint smile, "Senior Marshal Brother Gao, you don't have to feel embarrassed. I guess Marshal Uncle wants you to help me? It doesn't matter, just do as he says." Gao Shiping was taken aback. He looked at Lu Wanwan with an embarrassed look on his face. Lu Wanwan snorted and said, "You refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit." Combined with the scene in front of them, everyone believed that Yu Qianzhou was telling the truth. It seemed that Elder Lu was really going to punish Marshal Uncle Yu. Someone became anxious. Lu Xia immediately stomped her feet and shouted at Lu Wanwan, "Grandpa, how could you do such a thing?" Lu Wanwan glared at her and shouted, "This is an adult's matter. Why are you interrupting? Let's go back." Lu Xia did not comply and made a fuss. In the end, she was dragged away by her grandpa. The group of disciples also turned into flowing lights and followed her. "Old thing, how dare you threaten me? Today, I'll give you some extra food so that you can go back and enjoy the show, so that you won't come here for nothing." Yu Qianzhou murmured as he looked at the people flying away. Although he said it softly, he did not mean to avoid the two people beside him. Sure, Xiaodian was not an idiot. Combining what his big brother had said before and listening to what his big brother had said, his eyes that were originally solemn and stirring were instantly filled with shock. Although Gao Shiping did not know what had happened, he could tell that Yu Qianzhou was scolding Lu Wanwan. He could not help but admire Yu Qianzhou's courage. He even dared to scold an elder of the sect. Thinking about it, he felt satisfied. Since Yu Qianzhou dared to scold him in front of him, it was obvious that he did not treat him as an outsider. "Senior Brother Gao, tell me, how does Grand Elder Lu want you to torture me?" Yu Qianzhou sneered. Gao Shiping shook his head and smiled bitterly. "Junior brother, it seems that you have really offended the sect leader. Elder Lu actually came here to pass on the sect leader's decree. He did not say anything else. He only told me that from today onwards, junior brother, your mining volume will be doubled." Sigh. I can protect junior brother and other things, but the mining volume of spirit stones will be supervised by the disciples of several branches. I dare not be biased. I am afraid that junior brother will not be able to complete the task. As for the punishment, I will also... Yu Qianzhou waved his hand and interrupted him. "Senior brother, you don't need to say any more. I know. Senior brother, just do what you have to do. You want to stump me with such a small matter? How childish." Gao Shiping secretly felt that it was a pity. In this way, he was afraid that his share of income would be gone. Those were upper-grade spirit stones. Yu Qianzhou seemed to see through Gao Shiping's thoughts. He smiled and said, "Don't worry, senior brother. 1 or 2 spirit stones is not a problem for me. You and I will continue as usual. However, there is one thing that I have to trouble senior brother with." His words had already made some things clear. Gao Shiping understood that Yu Qianzhou was clearly telling him that he would not be lacking in upper-grade spirit stones. His eyes immediately lit up. He patted his chest and said, "If junior brother has no problem, I naturally have no problem. Just tell me what you need." Yu Qianzhou smiled. He was very fond of people who did things straightforwardly after receiving money. These kind of people were not afraid of you reaching out, but afraid that you would not accept. He said in a low voice, "I hope senior brother can prepare more food and wine for us to bring into the cave. After all, If the mining volume increases, it'll be a big problem if we don't have enough to eat. I was wondering what it was. Junior brother, don't worry. I will take care of this, Gao Shiping promised. Yu Qianqiu then said to Xiao Tian, go and rest now. Once you are full of energy, you will start work tomorrow. Gao Shiping also said, you are sure Xiao Tian, right? Follow Junior brother well. When the time comes, I will treat you well. What a joke. Helping Yu Qianqiu well was the same as helping him well. Of course, he would say that. Sure, Xiao Tian nodded and went back to his room without saying another word. Actually, he was not worried at all. Not to mention doubling the size of the place boss found. Even if it was 3 or 4 times bigger, he would still dig it out. After the 3 of them left, Yu Qianqiu lazily lay back on the chair and continued to bask in the sun. He was thinking about a problem now. The conflict between him and Ong Kwangsung had reached this point. It seemed like it was impossible for him to stay here for a long time. However, it was even more impossible for him to tell anyone about his secret. In this cultivation world where the strong preyed on the weak, that was his trump card to save his life. He would not tell anyone about it. The current solution was that as long as he could stay in the Spirit Stone mine for one more day, he would do his best to fish for as many Spirit Stones as he could. When he had enough Spirit Stones, he would leave. If this place did not keep him, there would be another place for him. What was there to be afraid of? The next day, after entering the Spirit Stone mine, Xiao Tian noticed that Boss's face was much more serious. After entering the mine, he did not walk slowly and directly brought them to the mining area. He was secretly puzzled. What was Boss worried about? With so many Spirit Stones, would he be afraid of not being able to complete the task? Before digging, Yu Qianqiu cautiously instructed Xiao Tian, from today onwards, do your best to mine for middle-grade Spirit Stones. Leave the low-grade Spirit Stones for now. We'll talk about it later. Got it. These 2 days, Xiao Tian was already extremely impressed by Boss. Seeing that Boss was so serious, he understood that he must have his reasons. He did not ask much and nodded heavily. Yu Qianqiu looked at him appreciatively and nodded. The 2 of them immediately split up and started the mining in full swing. Within 3 days, Yu Qianqiu returned to the Golden Pearl. Seeing the tall pile of Spirit Stones in the forest, he did not seem too satisfied. He knew that money was not enough when it was needed. Since he had embarked on the path of cultivation, he must do his best to lay a good foundation for the future. Originally, this elegant place was filled with Spirit Stones. White Fox was a little unhappy. Seeing that Yu Qianqiu rarely showed up, she wanted to say a few words to him. However, when she saw the rare seriousness on his face, she knew that something must have happened. Just as she was about to ask a few questions, that hateful guy disappeared again. As he wished, Gao Shiping obtained another high-grade Spirit Stone. Yu Qianqiu had also completed their quest. Seeing that, Gao Shiping was filled with admiration. Yu Qianqiu gave him good food and wine. Halfway through the wine, Gao Shiping stopped drinking and asked them to continue. Yu Qianqiu asked curiously, Senior Marshal Brother Gao, you haven't drunk to your heart's content. Why don't you drink? The Sect sent people to transport the Spirit Stones. I still have something to arrange. Originally, all the miners had to go to work. However, Junior Marshal Brother, you 2 don't have to. Just drink without worry, Gao Shiping said. Yu Qianqiu nodded and saw him out. Not long after the wine and food were finished, Gao Shiping came back with a sad face. He smiled bitterly and said, Junior Marshal Brother, I'm going to break my promise. This time, the elder leading the team is Elder Lu Wanqian. When he saw that you weren't among the miners, he reprimanded me and ordered you to work with the other miners. Junior Marshal Brother, I'm sorry. Damn it. That old fart, he's going all out against me. Yu Qianqiu stood up and cursed. However, he had no choice but to go with Xiao Tian and Gao Shiping. At the cave where the Spirit Stones were stored, Lu Wanwan, who was standing in front of a group of miners, snorted when he saw Yu Qianqiu. This brat's granddaughter had been quarreling with him for the past few days. The dozen elders beside him also looked over. They were all familiar with Yu Qianqiu. Seeing that everyone was present, Lu Wanwan took out a small golden dragon from the storage pouch at his waist. He made a few hand seals and shot a few white lights at the little golden dragon. Then, he tossed the golden dragon into the air. The golden dragon emitted a dazzling light and grew with the wind. In an instant, an incomparably huge and lifelike dragon landed in front of everyone. Lu Wanwan made another hand seal. A giant scale on the dragon's abdomen fell down, creating a large hole. The dragon scale happened to be the stepping stone to enter the cave. Yu Qianqiu was amazed. Although he had heard of this transportation artifact before, it was his first time seeing it. After the group of miners was inspected, they were all herded into the cave. The huge cave was filled with bags of spirit stones. Yu Qianqiu drooled at the sight of it. Then, they were ordered to carry the bags of spirit stones into the dragon's abdomen. Shi Xiaotian was determined to follow Boss closely. If Boss carried one bag, he would carry one bag. Wherever Boss went, he would follow. The space in the dragon's abdomen was really big. With so many miners carrying the stones in an endless stream, it was unknown how many bags they had carried. In short, Yu Qianqiu couldn't remember. When they were almost done, the two of them entered the cave again. The cave was already empty except for 2 bags. Yu Qianqiu couldn't be bothered to carry the stones anymore. He pulled Shi Xiaotian to the side. There would naturally be someone else to carry the stones. As expected, 2 miners directly walked over and carried the bags on their shoulders. Put them down. A familiar voice came from behind. Yu Qianqiu turned his head and saw Lu Wanwan staring at him coldly. Lu Wanwan slowly said, "You two carry them out." Yu Qianqiu was speechless. In his heart, he wanted to bite Lu Wanwan to death. The two of them carried the last 2 bags of spirit stones out. Lu Wanwan shouted again, "Everyone, get out and accept the inspection." In the dragon's abdomen, the two of them put down the spirit stones. Just as they turned around and walked to the door, a red light suddenly fell from the sky. It directly shot into the group of gathered miners. In an instant, a loud explosion sounded. A powerful shock wave blasted out in all directions, along with the shattered corpses. Standing at the entrance of the dragon's abdomen, the two of them were dumbfounded. Before they could react, they were pushed back inside by the shockwave. Demonic cultivators are attacking. Disciple Ong Kwang Tsung, follow me to fight. Lu Wanwan's hysterical shout came from outside. The 2 elders guarding the dragon's abdomen instantly shot out. Chapter 26. Just as Yu Qianqiu and Shi Xiaotian were about to get up, they heard a loud crash above their heads. The dragon's body shook nonstop. When they looked up, they saw several large dents on the top. The sound of fighting outside seemed to be getting more and more intense. The dragon's body was affected, and the ear-piercing sound of metal shook their ears until they felt dizzy. They really couldn't take it anymore. The two of them staggered toward the door, almost unable to stand steadily. Holding onto the door, Yu Qianqiu shook his dizzy head and looked out. He was immediately dumbfounded. Figures were flying everywhere in the sky and on the ground. Colorful rays of light whistled and attacked in all directions. Explosions were everywhere, and the crazy shouts were like thunder. While they were in a daze, a dazzling blood-red beam suddenly shot towards them. "Oh my God!" Yu Qianqiu let out a strange cry. Just as he retracted his head, a loud sound rang out. The door immediately caved in. The scene before them shook violently, and the strong airflow shook them back again. Yu Qianqiu, who fell into the cabin, slapped his buzzing ears with both hands. Before he could recover, another series of violent collisions hit the dragon's body. He was almost stunned. He really couldn't take it anymore. He quickly tore 2 pieces of cloth from his clothes and stuffed them into his ears. When Shi Xiaotian saw this, he also followed suit. With the cloth blocking his ears, the effect was much better. Feeling the violent tremors under his feet, Yu Qianqiu slowly stood up. Shi Xiaotian gestured to him if he wanted to go out. Damn it! Going out now is not courting death. Yu Qianqiu looked outside the cabin and quickly waved his hand, indicating that he didn't want to go out. The madness outside did not seem to be weakening. Instead, it seemed to be getting more and more intense. Oh my God, is this the battle between cultivators? This was the first time he saw such a scene. He was shocked and filled with emotions. This is 2F King crazy. So this is the path I'm walking on. Yuchincho couldn't help but feel his blood boil. He clenched his fists tightly and waved them around. Awesome. Cultivators, don't run. I'm here to join in the fun. Of course, when he said that he wanted to join in the fun, he didn't mean that he was going to die now. He was probably referring to one day in the future. Sure, Xiaotian couldn't hear what his boss was saying, but he could tell that his boss was very excited. Due to the violent shaking of the dragon's body, the stacks of spirit stones in the warehouse finally toppled over. Yuchincho's eyes lit up. With so many spirit stones, why would I need to dig? Anyway, I don't plan to stay in Kuangsung for long. In short, if not now, then when? Baby, I'm coming. Yuchincho waved his hands and touched the spirit stones. Bags of spirit stones disappeared without a trace as his hands touched them. Sure, Xiaotian suspected that his eyes were playing tricks on him. After confirming that he was not mistaken, he was so shocked that his mouth could not close, and his mind went blank. When the last bag of spirit stones disappeared, the wealth that Kuangsung had accumulated in this spirit stone mine for more than half a year had been swept clean. Yuchincho looked inside the warehouse, and after confirming that there was nothing missing, he patted his stomach in satisfaction. His gaze fell on the dumbfounded Xiaotian, and he chuckled. He walked over and said, I'll send you to a fun place. After saying that, he didn't care if Xiaotian heard him or if he was willing. He grabbed his hand and threw him into the golden bead. The one who found it the most unbelievable was probably the white fox. She finally knew how crazy Yuchincho was. When the first bag fell from the sky, the white fox looked at it leisurely. But for the rest of the meal, the bags did not stop. They fell crazily until they piled up into a small mountain. She could no longer be indifferent. In a flash, she appeared in the bamboo pavilion, out of the forest, and stood in front of the huge pile of falling objects. She frowned slightly, wondering what Yuchincho was doing. Her slender, jade-like fingers drew a white ray, and the cloth bag tore open with a hiss. The spirit stones scattered all over the ground. The white fox was slightly stunned, and her slender fingers drew a few more white rays. Hiss, hiss, hiss. More than 10 cloth bags were cut open, and the spirit stones rolled down. Her alluring red lips opened slightly, and she was stunned. Could it be that this mountain of cloth bags were filled with spirit stones? Oh my God, where did all these come from? While she was still in shock, someone suddenly shouted in the sky. She looked up and saw a figure land on top of the cloth bags and roll down. Sure, Xiaotian fell to the ground and got up. A peerless beauty was standing in front of him. Both of them asked in surprise, Yuchincho originally wanted to hide in the golden bead, but there was a serious problem in front of him. When he entered and exited the golden bead, he would return to the same place he entered from. If he entered from the warehouse, what if the transportation artifact shrank back to its original size when he came out? What happened then? Would it become a concentrated essence? This was a risk he could not take. He shuddered at the thought of it. Yuchincho hid at the entrance of the warehouse, waiting for an opportunity to slip out and escape. The commotion outside was getting quieter and quieter. Occasionally, one or two angry shouts and sounds of fighting could be heard. At this moment, Yuchincho pounced outside. Just as he was about to land on the ground and escape, he felt something tighten around his neck. A large hand was strangling him. The force was so strong that it almost killed him, but it was enough to make his brain short of oxygen for a short period of time, and his eyes rolled back. Yuchincho's limbs flailed, and the person who was holding his neck seemed to sense his difficulty in breathing. The 5 fingers loosened slightly, and the person held his neck in front of him. Yuchincho also had a chance to catch his breath. Just as he was about to escape, he suddenly saw a group of people floating in the air in front of him. All of them were holding weapons, and among them was an enchanting and charming woman wearing a bright red palace dress. As the wind blew, her 2 fair and slender legs could be vaguely seen in the red gauze, and it was extremely alluring. She was smiling in the direction of Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu's eyeballs almost popped out. He thought to himself that it was not too late to leave later, and that he should take a look first. The enchanting woman with red makeup looked down and smiled charmingly. Lu Wanwan, it has been 100 years since we last met. I have missed you so much, and I have specially come to meet you today. Why are you holding this kid in front of you? Could it be that people become timid as they get older? Do you need to find a kid to boost your courage? Hee hee. The group of people behind her also burst into laughter. Lu Wanwan, with messy hair and a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth, angrily shouted, "Demonic woman, shut up. Don't think that I don't know what you are planning. You know that I, Ong Kwang Sung, am transporting spirit stones today, so you came here to steal them. The Devil Path evildoers are extremely shameless and only dare to do some sneaky things. If you have the ability, come to my Qing Guang Mountain." Damn it, it's really this old bastard. With such a loud voice, he sprayed spittle all over my face. If you want to die, then go ahead and die. Why are you pulling me and not letting go? I've never heard of anyone pulling their own people down with them before they die. Yu Qianqiu could tell that the person who was holding his neck was Lu Wanwan. Hee, go to Ong Kwang Sung. The woman with red makeup laughed tenderly. She stretched out her arms and gently stroked her hair. Although Ong Kwang Sung is getting weaker with each generation, those old monsters hiding in the back mountain still have some ability. I am just a weak woman, so how would I dare to take risks? Therefore, I can only bully a big man like you here. This doesn't seem to be too much. It's a pity that the spirit stones that Ong Kwang Sung has accumulated for more than half a year are going to belong to me. Sigh, Lu Wanwan, seeing that you are acquainted with me, as long as you kneel down and beg for mercy, I can consider letting you live. The people behind her burst into laughter again. This elder sister's voice was really pleasant to listen to. Yu Qianqiu was a little dazed as he listened. His back gradually leaned against Lu Wanwan's body. 100 charm, demon lady. Do you see who I'm holding in my hand? As Lu Wanwan spoke, his 5 fingers tightened again. Yu Qianqiu, who had just leaned against him, was pinched by the neck and pushed away. The latter held his breath, and his throat emitted a caw-caw sound. Fortunately, his 5 fingers loosened after that. The people floating in the air were stunned when they heard this. The 100 charm demon lady carefully sized up Yu Qianqiu. She didn't see anything special about him, nor did she feel that she had seen him before. She couldn't help but cover her mouth and laugh. Lu Wanwan, you want to threaten me by simply holding a low-level disciple of Ong Kwang Sung as a hostage? Do you really think that I am as stupid as you? Ha! Lu Wanwan laughed wildly. Demon woman, others may not know, but do you think I don't? For the past 100 years, my junior brother has been depressed because of you and has been lonely all day. I don't think you have forgotten my junior brother, have you? Are you really here to steal spirit stones? You must be here to vent your anger after hearing about my junior brother's death, right? The ones who killed my junior brother are the Daluo Sect. Why don't you go and vent your anger on them? Oof. Do you know who is in my hand? It is the direct disciple who is as close to Hao Wu Wei as father and son. Demon woman, if you dare stand in my way, I will definitely kill him. Yu Qianqiu's body trembled when he heard the first part of the sentence. He vaguely guessed that the person Lu Wanwan was talking about was his master. However, when he heard that the person was called Hao Wu Wei, he immediately understood that Lu Wanwan was probably trying to pass off a fish's eye as a pearl and find an opportunity to escape. But this was also good. If that big sister was really his master's lover, he really wouldn't dare to have any improper thoughts. The 100 charm demon lady stared at Yu Qianqiu with a glint in her eyes. Her expression turned solemn, and she said sternly, "So what if he is Hao Wu Wei's disciple? The disciple of such a heartless person is definitely not a good person. Even if you don't kill him, I will kill him as soon as possible." As soon as she finished speaking, she turned into a red shadow and pounced forward like a ghost. F*CK. No matter how beautiful a girl is, her life is more important. Yu Qianqiu was startled. Just as he was about to hide in the golden bead, his neck suddenly tightened, and his mind temporarily blanked out. He vaguely felt that he was thrown away by Lu Wanwan. As soon as he regained consciousness, he felt a soft fragrance wrap around him. When he opened his eyes again, he was already lightly landing on the ground. Above him, a group of people chased after Lu Wanwan. Huh, strange. I'm actually fine. Yu Qinsho couldn't believe it, but both sides wanted his life. He looked around and saw that there was no one around, the pungent smell of blood, and the ground was littered with broken corpses. Obviously, most of them were Ong Kwangsung's people. He could also vaguely see that a few of the corpses belonged to Ong Kwangsung's elders. He didn't dare to have any improper thoughts anymore. With a thought, he disappeared from where he stood. Chapter 27. Stop! The 100 Charms beauty waved her hand and shouted after Zhang Xian. A group of people stopped in the air. One of her subordinates asked, "Palace Master, why did you stop? Lu Wanwan can't escape. Leave him alive to inform Ong Kwangsung. More than 10 original Soul Stage elders died, and so many spirit stones were lost. I believe Ong Kwangsung will feel the pinch." The Allure Beauty smiled. The man frowned and said, "Palace Master, don't you want to kill him? I'm afraid it will bring trouble to the Demon Illusion Palace." "Humph. Do you think Ong Kwangsung won't know it was us who killed Lu Wanwan?" The 100 Charm Demon Lady said coldly, "I want the Blue Light Sect to know that it was done by my Demon Illusion Palace. I don't think they have the guts to come to my Phantomine Mountain. A bunch of cowards." A trace of hatred flashed through her eyes as she looked at the direction Lu Wanwan escaped in. "Go back and transport the spirit stones back to the palace," she shouted, and everyone flew back to the spirit stone mine. In the sky above the spirit stone mine, the Allure Beauty looked around in confusion. She had planted a soul sense on the young man, but why couldn't she sense it? She could clearly feel that the divine sense she planted had been easily dispelled by someone. She was at the early stage of passing tribulation. How could someone who was not at the middle stage of passing tribulation easily dispel the divine sense she planted? Moreover, it had happened in an instant. This meant that the person who had dispelled the divine sense was most likely at the late stage of passing tribulation. Otherwise, it would have been impossible to dispel it in such a short time. "Palace Master, come down and take a look. Something strange has happened," the subordinate who was transporting the dragon body reported. The pretty figure in the air suddenly flashed and entered the warehouse. Looking at the empty warehouse, the Allure Beauty's face was no longer seductive. She frowned, and her face was full of solemnity. The whole warehouse of spirit stones was gone. How was this possible? He clearly saw that the Blue Light Sect had brought the spirit stones in before he made his move. Who on earth had such magical powers to be able to transport all the spirit stones away in such a short period of time? It was simply unimaginable. Recalling the matter of her divine sense being removed by someone just now, she was suddenly startled. Her figure flashed into the air, and she shouted, "Everyone, return to the Demon Illusion Palace immediately. We can't stay here for long." The group of subordinates could hear the urgency in the palace master's voice. Not daring to slack off, they flew into the sky and followed the palace master. As soon as Yu Qinsho entered the Golden Pearl, he saw the conspicuous mountain and shouted, "I'm rich." Immediately, he leaped over and had intimate contact with it. He rolled on top of it and danced with joy. He patted the bag full of spirit stones and laughed heartily. After a long time, he stood up and looked at the majestic figure before him with a satisfied expression. Just as he was shaking his head, he saw Sir Xiaotian pacing back and forth at the side. He was slightly taken aback, and only then did he remember that he had brought Sir Xiaotian in as well. Logically speaking, he did not want Sir Xiaotian to know about Jin Zhu, but in the heat of the moment, he did not care so much. So be it. After observing him for this period of time, this kid should be a trustworthy person. Suddenly, he realized that something was wrong. Sir Xiaotian seemed to have been walking in circles within a radius of tens of meters. Could it be that this kid had nothing better to do and was taking a walk? Unlikely. He could not help but shout, Shouted Yan, what are you doing? No response. He shouted a few more times, but there was still no response. It seemed that he could not even see that he was standing in front of him. Yu Qianshou felt strange and walked over to see what he was doing. But as soon as he walked within tens of meters of Sure Shao Tian, there was a force that repelled him. The harder he tried, the stronger the force became. Yu Qianshou understood that there was no one else here except for Sister Bai. She must have done something. He immediately passed through the forest and came to the bamboo house. In the bamboo pavilion, the music was still playing and the beauty was sitting. He laughed and applauded. The beauty really plays the zither well and sings a good song. The white fox did not even bat an eyelid and ignored him. Yu Qianshou sat in front of her and said with an awkward smile, "Good sister, release the people outside. He's my friend." The music suddenly stopped, and the white fox glanced at him coldly. A certain someone jumped in fright. He had never seen such a sharp look from her. The former said coldly, "It's because I know you sent him in, or else I would have dug out his shifty eyes long ago. He's not welcome here. I'll let him out when you decide to send him out." Yu Qianshou was stunned. He thought to himself, how did Sure Xiaoyan's eyes offend you? Looking at the peerless beauty in front of him, he immediately reacted and shook his head with a bitter smile. "With your beauty, which man wouldn't take a second look at you? Forget it, I won't say any more. Xiaotian, you're out of luck. Turn around," the white fox said with a slightly surprised look. "What?" Yu Qianshou was stunned. The white fox glared at him and scolded. "I told you to turn around. Didn't you hear me?" "No way. Sister, you won't even let me look." The other party's pretty face turned cold. Yu Qianshou did not dare to speak anymore and obediently turned around. Two slender fingers reached out and touched Yu Qianshou's back. Before he could react, he heard the white fox say, "It's done." He turned around and saw a transparent flame on top of her slender fingers. "What is this? It's on my body?" Yu Qianshou asked suspiciously. The white fox frowned and said, "Someone planted a strand of divine sense on your body. If it wasn't discovered in time, the person would have immediately discovered your whereabouts the moment you appeared outside. Judging from this divine sense, the person is a woman. I'm afraid her cultivation level has already reached the early stage of the tribulation passing stage." Could it be her? Yu Qianshou let out a strange cry. He had already suspected the temptress of 100 charms, but he was not sure why she had done this. Could it be that she had discovered that he had stolen the spirit stones? The white fox did not say anything else. A ball of flame appeared on her fingertip and wrapped around the strand of divine sense, turning it into smoke in an instant. Looking at the strand of divine sense that had turned into smoke, Yu Qianshou's expression turned serious. He tapped his fingers on the stone table happily, thinking about what he should do from now on. The white fox did not disturb him. This scene was familiar to her many years ago. The scholar was frowning as he pondered over the questions in his book, while she watched quietly from the side. She liked this feeling very much. The white fox could not figure out why the temptress had planted a divine sense on his body, so she did not think about it for the time being. Kwang-tsung would not go back. He had enough spirit stones now, so it was time for him to find a place to cultivate. It was not enough to cultivate here. The temptress would definitely leave, and Kwang-tsung would have to return to the spirit stone mine sooner or later. He should take advantage of the fact that neither of them were around to leave as soon as possible. Otherwise, even if he managed to improve his cultivation level here, he would have to leave one day. He could not hide here for the rest of his life. With his cultivation level, it was easy to hide in the Golden Pearl and not be caught, but it would be difficult to run out of the Spirit Stone mine. He did not know if there was still anyone in the Spirit Stone mine. No way. He had to go out and take a look now. If he could not do it, he would immediately come back to hide. He did as he said. With a move of his divine sense, the scenery changed, and he appeared in the Spirit Stone mine. It was quiet all around. The smell of blood had not dissipated, and no one cared about the disgusting severed limbs. No one. This was a good opportunity to escape. Yu Qianshou was overjoyed. He raised his mysterious heaven skill to the limit and immediately ran in the opposite direction of where Kwang-tsung came from. His cultivation level was still far from flying on a sword, but his running and jumping speed was not something an ordinary person could compare with. He escaped like a wisp of smoke in the desolate mountains. Not long after, he was already far away from the Spirit Stone mine. Thinking back to the scene at that time, he felt a little scared. Speaking of which, he really had to thank Lu Wanwan. If he hadn't forced him and Sure Xiaotian to carry the last 2 bags of Spirit Stones, the 2 of them would have been like the other miners, with their heads separated from their bodies. The situation at that time was too sudden. Even if he had the golden pearl, he would not have made it in time. Sigh. Cherish your life and try your best to escape. Just a while after Yu Qianqiu left, almost 100 streams of light came from the direction of Ong Kwangsung and landed on the Spirit Stone mine. If anyone who knew Ong Kwangsung saw this, they would be shocked. Almost all the elders of Ong Kwangsung were there. Ong Kwangsung's sect master Lu Changqing and elder Lu Wanwan were among them. They were led by 3 old men with white hair and beards. Even if Yu Qianqiu was here, he would not have seen these 3 people. Everyone glanced at the Spirit Stone mine that looked like a slaughterhouse. Their faces were all pale. When the 3 old men in the lead closed their eyes shone brightly. Just this point alone was enough to show the high cultivation level of the 3. Moreover, the 3 of them could stand in front of Sect Master Lu Changqing. It was obvious that their status was not ordinary. The face of the old man in the middle twitched. He said slowly, "Look around." Other than the 2 old men on the left and right, everyone behind him received the order and dispersed. Soon, the elders returned and reported the situation. When they heard that all the Spirit Stones had been robbed and there were no survivors in the mine, the old man in the lead snorted and said, "Lu Changqing, what did you do as a sect master? Why did you store the Spirit Stones for half a year before they were shipped back to the sect?" Lu Changqing's expression changed. He knelt on the spot and said fearfully, "Master, the sect still has a lot of Spirit Stones in storage. The mining volume of the 5 Spirit Stone mines is increasing. I'm afraid that we won't be able to store all the Spirit Stones, so enough." The old man cut him off. Spirit Stones are for the sect disciples to increase their cultivation level. Why do we need to store so many Spirit Stones? Since the mining volume has increased, why didn't the distribution of the disciples increase? Could it be that the overall cultivation level of the sect disciples has increased? Would they be afraid of not having Spirit Stones to enjoy in the future? Short-sighted thing, why did I choose you as the sect master in the first place? All the disciples in the Spirit Stone mine are dead, and all the Spirit Stones have been robbed. What a shame. Lu Changqing, how do you want me to explain this to the patriarchs when I return? Master, please don't be angry. I know I was wrong. I am willing to accept the punishment. Lu Changqing, who also looked like an old man, had lost all of the dignity of a sect master. Oof. The old man glanced at the kneeling disciple and looked at the 2 old men on the left and right. He said in a deep voice, "Junior brothers, it seems that I, Ong Kwangsung, have been quiet for too long. Some time ago, the Deluo sect killed my disciples and stole my spirit herbs. Now, the Demon Illusion Palace has come to kill and rob. I wonder who will come to visit next time. I just broke through to the middle stage of tribulation passing a few days ago. It's time for me to play a role. What do you think, junior brothers?" One of the old men said coldly, "If I remember correctly, Ong Kwangsung should be one of the top 10 cultivation sects of the Xia Empire." The other old man smiled faintly. "It seems that the cultivation world is too quiet now." Chapter 28. After 2 sunsets and sunrise, he could vaguely see the village with smoke rising from the chimneys. Believing that Ong Kwangsung would not find him, Yu Qianqiu, who was panting, stopped and returned to the golden pearl. The big pile of spirit stones was still there. Looking at Sure Xiaotian again, he was sitting there dejectedly, as if he had no hope of getting out. Yu Qianqiu looked at him and shook his head. He passed through the forest and walked into the bamboo pavilion. He smiled bitterly at the beauty in the pavilion. "Sister, let him out. I'll bring him out." The white fox stopped playing the zither and glared at him. Without saying a word, she slowly stood up and walked out of the bamboo pavilion. Her white clothes fluttered as she walked out of the forest. Seeing the scattered spirit stones in the forest, she couldn't help but frown. Yu Qianqiu followed closely behind. The graceful figure in front of him was still as beautiful as ever, but the feeling that could entice him in the past was no longer there. For some reason, he no longer had any desire to get intimate with the white fox. Perhaps it was because he was used to calling her big sister, and subconsciously, he really did treat her as his big sister. The two of them stood in front of Shi Xiaotian and watched him mumble to himself. He turned a deaf ear to the two people standing in front of him. The sky was so close, but they couldn't see anything. The strange thing was, Yu Qianqiu looked around and didn't see any formation. How could it trap Xiaotian? He looked at the white fox beside him and sighed. Drawing a prison? Sister, you're really good. Teach me when you can. I can't use it before I reach the foundation building stage. The white fox said softly. Her slender fingers formed a seal, and dozens of white lights shot out from all directions around Shi Xiaotian. Yu Qianqiu looked carefully. The things that were shot out were actually spirit stones. The sister beside him waved her arm, and dozens of spirit stones fell onto the pile of cloth bags. So they were using local materials. Just like that, they trapped Shi Xiaotian for 2 days. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. In the future, don't bring irrelevant people in to disturb my peace. Do you hear? White Fox scolded. Her words really sounded like an elder sister lecturing her younger brother. Yu Qianqiu smiled sheepishly and said, Elder sister is right. Humph. The white fox snorted coldly and disappeared without a trace. Yu Qianqiu knew that she was playing her lousy zither again. He thought to himself that she was not tired of playing it over and over again. He wondered if it was time to find a boyfriend for her. But then he smiled. Probably not. This cheap sister was completely infatuated with love. Boss, where are you? Come and save me. Don't tell me you're really going to abandon little Tian. Shi Xiaotian, who was sitting on the ground, kept muttering to himself. When Yu Qianqiu heard what he was saying, he couldn't help but laugh. Of all the people he could provoke, he had to provoke the vixen, who had cultivated for 1,000 years and had reached the late stage of tribulation passing. He walked over and kicked his butt twice, shouting, What kind of dream are you having? Come back with me. It was Boss's voice. Shi Xiaotian was stunned. He jumped up and turned around. That familiar face with an evil smile was right in front of him. He was so excited that he wanted to say something, but he saw Boss's hand reaching out and pulling him. Then his vision blurred. When he could see clearly again, the scene had changed. Fortunately, Boss was still in front of him. Boss! Shi Xiaotian grabbed Yu Qianqiu's arm, fearing that he would run away again. Then, Shi Xiaotian began to talk nonstop, pouring out all of his tragic experiences. Yu Qianqiu looked at him coldly and said, Are you done? Shi Xiaotian was stunned. He nodded stiffly, indicating that he was done. Following that, Yu Qianqiu gave him a torrent of abuse. The gist of it was, Do you know who you're messing with? That's my sister. If it wasn't for me, she would have dug your eyes out. Shi Xiaotian was a bit dumbfounded by the scolding. He stared at his boss's face for a long time before muttering, How can two siblings look so different? Fortunately, Yu Qianqiu didn't hear him. Otherwise, he would have been fiercely provoked. Boss, where's this? Shi Xiaotian looked around and asked. Yu Qianqiu looked at him and smiled. He let out a long breath and said, I also don't know where this place is, but from today onwards, the two of us will no longer exist in Ong Kwangsung. We also don't need to look at Ong Kwangsung's face anymore. He was right. When Lu Wanwan returned to Ong Kwangsung, many people asked about Yu Qianqiu. The answer they got was that he had probably died in the hands of the enchantress of 100 Charms. This made all the elders sigh. The capital of the Huaxiao Empire was a bustling place. There was an endless stream of horses and carriages, and people came and went. Both sides of the smooth streets were lined with inns and tea houses. There were all kinds of shops. Walking on the streets, the sound of peddlers could be heard everywhere. From time to time, beautiful women dressed up could be seen. They were in groups of 3 to 5, trying to attract people. Looking at the signboard behind them, It was nothing more than a hong brothel or hundred-flower brothel. The ladies in the brothel had long trained their eyes. They could tell who was rich and who wasn't. For example, the two people walking on the street, the ladies were afraid to avoid them. Yu Qianqiu and Shi Xiaotian chuckled. Their current appearances were indeed unsightly. They had traveled thousands of miles and were covered in dust. Finally, they had arrived at this bustling capital city. Why did they come here? Because Shi Xiaotian was homesick. Also, the two of them had left on Kwangsung and didn't know where to go. Yu Qianqiu was also interested in seeing the capital. National Pillar General's residence. Far away from the bustling city, in front of a majestic courtyard, Yu Qianqiu read the signboard. He looked at Shi Xiaotian suspiciously and said, "Are you sure this is your home? Are you sure?" He couldn't be blamed for asking this question. The latter had led him on a few wrong paths while searching for his home. In the end, he had gone through so much trouble, and now he was led to a place with such a scary signboard. Shi Xiaotian shook his head silently. Looking at the majestic courtyard, tears welled up in his eyes. Yu Qianqiu looked at him in disdain. This unlucky child was crying so easily. It was really unbearable. However, it seemed like he was right. He didn't say anything else. He crossed his arms and waited quietly. The two of them were silent for a while. Just as Shi Xiaotian was about to knock on the door, the hurried sound of horse hooves came from afar. The two of them turned their heads to look. Dozens of horses galloped over from afar. Soon, they arrived before the two of them. "Stop!" The leading young general in dark silver armor waved his hand and shouted. He pulled the reins in his hand. The strong horses neighed, and the dozens of people behind them stopped the galloping horses. Dozens of people jumped off their horses at the same time, their armor clanking loudly. Their imposing manner was truly extraordinary. Wow, this is so much more handsome than in the movies. Yu Qianqiu was envious. The door of a National Pillar General's residence opened slowly with a dull sound. A servant walked out and shouted, "Second young master is back." He ran to the young general with a smile and took the reins. The young general glanced at Yu Qianqiu and Yu Qianqiu at the door. His gaze landed on Shi Xiaotian. He paused for a moment. Then, he looked forward and strode inside. "Second brother." The young general who had just stepped on the stairs was shocked. He turned his head slowly and looked at Shi Xiaotian in disbelief. He looked at him up and down. Then, he turned and said in surprise, "Third brother? Is that you, third brother?" "Second brother. It's me. I'm Xiaotian." Shi Xiaotian stumbled over. "Third brother, it's really you," the young general exclaimed. The two brothers ran over and hugged each other. The servant holding the horse paused for a moment, then immediately handed the reins in his hand to a soldier beside him and hurriedly ran into the mansion. After a few words, the young general suddenly pushed Shi Xiaotian's shoulder away. He looked at his younger brother and said, "Third brother, didn't you get taken away by the immortals to cultivate? How did you end up like this? And this is..." The last sentence was directed at Yu Qianqiu. The latter nodded and smiled at him. Shi Xiaotian was speechless. With tears on his face, he shook his head and choked. "Are father and mother healthy?" "Huh." The young general laughed and patted his brother's shoulder. "Come, let's talk inside." Then he waved at Yu Qianqiu and said, "This brother must be a friend of my third brother. Please come in and have a seat." Yu Qianqiu cupped his hands in thanks and followed the two brothers into the residence. The moment they entered, they could feel the oppressive aura of nobility. They were surrounded by pavilions and flowers. Servants shuttled back and forth, showing the extraordinary status of this family. Before the three of them reached the richly ornamented main hall, a group of people with a beautiful woman in their arms hurried towards them. They saw her calling from afar, "Senna." On the other side, Shi Xiaotian struggled free from his brother's arms and ran over, shouting, "Mother!" The mother and son, who hadn't seen each other for a long time, hugged each other and cried. The latter knelt down and refused to get up. Yu Qianqiu couldn't bear to watch the crying scene, so he closed his eyes to rest. Shi Xiaotian's second brother glanced at him and frowned. "Mother, third brother, Big Brother is back. The young general smiled and turned around, shouting, Big Brother, look who's here. Yu Qianqiu, who was resting with his eyes closed, also heard someone coming from behind. He opened his eyes and turned around. A young man dressed like a civil official walked in with a smile on his face. When he heard his second brother's words, he stopped smiling and looked at the person kneeling at his mother's feet. When he saw who it was, he exclaimed, Third brother, why are you back? You, how did you end up like this? As he spoke, he looked at his brother, who was dressed in rags, with surprise in his eyes. Shi Xiaotian stood up and shyly called out, Big Brother. Ha! Third brother is back. Good. Today is really a double blessing. Shi Xiaotian's big brother clapped and laughed. Everyone was a little baffled by his words. The second general said in a daze, Double happiness? Could it be that Big Brother has taken a fancy to some young lady? Since Third Brother is back, tell me about it. The civil official glared at his second brother and ignored him. He walked to Shi Xiaotian and patted his shoulder, smiling. Third brother, we're going to be kindred spirits soon. Huh, come to think of it, it's quite a coincidence today. I was out patrolling with a few colleagues, and we met an immortal master with profound transcendence energy. That immortal master could tell at a glance that I have the root of wisdom and has already agreed to take me as his disciple. Third brother, do you think we'll be kindred spirits in the future? Ha! When he saw everyone looking at each other, he laughed even more complacently. Suddenly, his gaze fell on Yu Qianqiu, who was also dressed in rags. His laughter stopped abruptly and was replaced with arrogance. He frowned and snorted. Who is this? Since when did the pillar of the State General's mansion become a place where people can come and go as they please? Chapter 29. Are you referring to me when you say someone who can come and go as he pleases? Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes as he stared at him. A hint of fierceness flashed through his eyes, and a hint of coldness floated through his indifferent words. In his previous life, although he was part of the underworld, he was also an overlord of an underground kingdom. The aura that he exuded unconsciously made him look down on everyone else. Although the people present were also people who had been above others for a long time, they relied on their illustrious family backgrounds. Facing Yu Qianqiu's aura that had been tempered through killing and decisiveness, they immediately paled in comparison. The second son of a junior general was slightly surprised. He was also a man who had fought on the battlefield. He wondered what kind of person his third son's friend was. Judging from his aura, it was impossible for an ordinary person to fake it. There seemed to be a faint scent of blood in his aura. It was impossible to have such an aura without dozens of lives on his hands and a long period of experience as a decisive person. This aura seemed to be frequently seen on his father, the pillar of the nation. The others also felt that familiar aura and were momentarily speechless. The second son of the civil official, who had been arrogant just a moment ago, was stunned by Yu Qianqiu's words. The beautiful woman with tears on her face also stopped crying and looked at him in surprise. It was also Shi Xiaotian's first time seeing Yu Qianqiu like this. It seemed that his big brother had really angered him. He shook his head slightly and walked to his big brother's side with a smile. He turned to everyone and said, Mother, big brother, second brother, this is my martial uncle and also my savior. If it wasn't for martial uncle, I'm afraid that little Tian would never be able to see mother and my two brothers again. The reason why he introduced his big brother to his family as his martial uncle was obvious. He was naturally afraid that his family would look down on his big brother and cause trouble. He then introduced his three relatives to Yu Qianqiu. This person was actually little Tian's martial uncle. Wasn't that also an immortal? The few of them were surprised by how young Yu Qianqiu was. At the same time, they felt uneasy and thought that they had neglected him just now. One had to know that in the Huaxia dynasty, even the current emperor would treat cultivators with great courtesy. However, they had just cast them aside, and the head of the civil officials had even spoken rudely. The second general immediately bowed and said, Junior Shi Intian greets Senior Immortal. Yu Qianqiu nodded indifferently. The civil official leader was a little fearful as he bowed and said, Junior Sir Yutian greets, Immortal Elder. I didn't know Immortal Elder's identity just now and have offended you. I hope Immortal Elder will forgive me. Yu Qianqiu glanced at him coldly, showing no intention of forgiving him at all. The former's face immediately turned pale. Seeing her eldest son's embarrassment, the beautiful woman also saluted and said, This mistress Li Hongyang greets, Immortal Master. My husband is away on an expedition, and my eldest son lacks discipline. I hope Immortal Master will forgive us if we have offended you. Yu Qianqiu really didn't plan to let go of the Shi clan's eldest son. He had suffered so many sarcastic remarks in Kwangtsung, but he had no choice but to lower his head. He didn't think that a mere mortal would dare to speak rudely to him. This immediately ignited the suppressed anger in his heart. But this woman's words had a hidden meaning. My husband isn't here. As an immortal, you wouldn't bully my son. Moreover, Shi Xiaotian was looking at him with a pleading expression, so he could only suppress the anger in his heart. Madam, there's no need to be so courteous. His words meant that he would no longer pursue the matter of the eldest son. Li Hongyang and her 3 sons hurriedly thanked him and ordered the servants to prepare food and wine to properly entertain the immortal. Yu Qianqiu tactfully refused. They had only just met, and things had already turned out like this. What was the point of eating and drinking together? Actually, there was another reason why he didn't get angry. His cultivation was indeed not that great, only at the 5th level of qi refining. Even Shi Xiaotian had already reached the 7th level of qi refining, although the latter still couldn't see through his cultivation. If they were to fight, who knows which side Shi Xiaotian would side with. In any case, it was impossible for Shi Xiaotian to help him beat up his own brother. Also, if his cultivation was exposed, would Shi Xiaotian still treat him as the boss in the future? This was really hard to say. He remembered that a certain elder brother with the surname Li once said, When the people's hearts are scattered, it's not easy to lead a team. Finally realizing the importance of cultivation, he pulled Shi Xiaotian to the side and asked him to arrange a secluded place to cultivate. The latter immediately passed on his eldest son's words to his mother, and immediately the entire general's mansion became busy. The pillar of the state general's mansion had a spacious back garden, and a small courtyard in the most remote corner was quickly cleaned up. The general's mansion issued a ban, and without permission, no one was allowed to enter the back garden. Xiaotian, if your family asks about your experiences, I think you should choose to tell them. Knowing too much won't do them any good. Also, it's best not to let outsiders know about what we're doing here. Otherwise, if Kwangtsung finds out one day, we'll be in big trouble. Yu Qianqiu said. The small courtyard was remote and quiet, and he was very satisfied. At this time, there were only the 2 of them in the small courtyard. Understand. Shi Xiaotian nodded. A year quickly passed, and the back garden of the pillar of the state general's mansion became a mysterious place. Other than the 3rd young master Shi Xiaotian, no one else had seen the immortal living inside. As for the matter of the immortal living in the back garden, the general's mansion had issued a strict gag order. Those who were lucky enough to see it that day would not say a word, and the other servants naturally didn't know. The servants who knew about it would secretly worship the small courtyard every day when they passed by the back garden. The legendary immortals lived there. The masters of the general's mansion were very happy that there was an immortal living in their house. They always felt that they had a backer, and their hearts were very secure. Most importantly, the immortal had the demeanor of an immortal and never disturbed them. As long as good wine and food were sent over every day, the immortal wouldn't even take a step out of the courtyard, let alone disturb them. But there was one person who was more depressed, the eldest young master of the general's mansion. Once, in order to show off to the immortal who wanted to accept him as a disciple, he mentioned that there was also an immortal hiding in his house. In the end, the immortal refused to accept him as a disciple, and even refused to see him. This was too painful for him. It was fine if he didn't know that he had the root of wisdom, but after knowing, it was simply too torturous. How many people could resist the temptation of immortality? So he set his sights on Yu Qianshou, wanting to become his disciple, and pestered his third young master several times to recommend him. But his third young master didn't agree at all, and said, "Big brother, I really can't see where you have the root of wisdom. You must have been tricked by someone." He was obsessed and didn't believe it no matter what, thinking that his third young master didn't want to recommend him because he had offended his martial uncle, and because of this, he blamed his third young master. There was one time when he was blinded by lard, and he barged into the small courtyard, intending to beg Yu Qianshou to accept him as a disciple. In the end, the moment he stepped into the courtyard, he felt like he was in a fog, and he couldn't get out no matter how many twists and turns he went, and he didn't see a single person. This was originally a simple formation that Yu Qianshou learned from the white fox in case someone barged in, and he set it up in the courtyard. Although it wasn't a powerful formation, it wasn't a problem to trap a mortal, but he didn't expect it to trap this guy. When Shi Xiaotian found out, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He could bring his big brother out, but it wasn't good for him to do that, so he could only beg Yu Qianshou to let him go. After Yu Qianshou understood why Shi Yutian was trapped, he shook his head and refused Shi Xiaotian, saying that he wanted to keep Shi Yutian trapped for a few more days, and if he didn't let his big brother suffer a little, he was afraid that there would be no end to it. Shi Xiaotian thought about it and agreed. But after 2 days, Li Hongyang became anxious, and she couldn't find her eldest son anywhere, and the imperial court was also looking for him everywhere. In the end, Shi Xiaotian was afraid that his mother and second brother would be too anxious, so he told his family that his big brother had barged into his martial uncle's courtyard and was trapped. Li Hongyang and Shi Yintian were shocked, and they quickly went to the courtyard in the back garden, but they didn't dare to enter the courtyard again. They saw Shi Yutian running around like a headless fly, and it was obvious that he was very weak since he hadn't eaten or drunk anything for 2 days. The mother and son immediately knelt in front of the courtyard and begged Yu Qianshou. Yu Qianshou thought that since the food and lodging belonged to him, he didn't want to go overboard. So he released Shi Yutian and warned him that if he barged in again, he wouldn't let him off lightly. This was only a small matter, but after the mother and son saw Yu Qianshou's divine power, they respected him even more. After Shi Yutian had a taste of it, his heart itched even more, but he didn't dare to barge in again. Relying on the large amount of spirit stones in the golden pearl, Yu Qianshou successfully broke through to the 10th level of qi refining in a short period of 1 year. Shi Xiaotian reached it earlier than him. After reaching the peak of qi refining, the next step was foundation building. After asking the white fox, a very serious problem was placed in front of him. Foundation building, core bearing, nascent soul, and tribulation passing were the 4 thresholds that cultivators couldn't cross. These 4 thresholds couldn't be crossed without the help of external forces, and the so-called external forces referred to the miraculous pills that could cleanse one's meridians. Why must one cleanse one's meridians? A cultivator's body was like a vessel. If the vessel wasn't strong enough, it wouldn't be able to bear a stronger cultivation. If one forcefully broke through, there would only be one result, and that was death by the explosion of the body. Yu Qianshou asked the white fox, "You were trapped in the cave for so many years and didn't take any miraculous pills. So how did you break through from the nascent soul stage to the tribulation passing stage? Now that I know this is the magical effect of the golden pearl, does that mean I can also use it to advance?" The white fox told him again, this is not the same thing. The cultivation world was divided into 3 paths: human, demon, and ghost. The white fox belonged to the demon path, which was different from the other 2 paths. The demon path cultivation and body refinement were carried out at the same time. If the body refinement was not successful, cultivation would be difficult. It was the hardest path to cultivate among the 3 paths, but it was also the most powerful among the 3 paths. The ghost path was the easiest path to cultivate. They didn't cultivate spiritual qi, but yin qi. As long as there was enough yin qi, they could increase their cultivation without any restrictions. However, due to the restrictions of the laws of heaven and earth, its power was also the weakest among the three paths. Although the human path was divided into the righteous path and the demon path, this was just a division between people. In fact, it was just a difference in the cultivation method. In the end, there was only one path. The human path was intelligent, and the three paths were respected. For the demon path, if they wanted to ascend to the immortal realm, they wouldn't have a chance if they didn't cultivate into a human form. Perhaps there was a gain and a loss. The laws of heaven and earth gave the human path the best, but gave it the weakest body. Therefore, the human path could think of many ways to increase their cultivation, but the body was the biggest restriction. In short, it told him that although the golden pearl was extremely strange, since it existed in the world, it had to follow the laws of heaven and earth. Some things couldn't be changed randomly, so it could help demons, but it might not help humans. The white fox also said when the golden pearl was in my body, although I didn't use it, I could feel the changes in my body and cultivation day after day. How did you feel after swallowing it for such a long time? Yu Qianqiu immediately became dejected and told her that other than his physique becoming a little better, he didn't feel anything. The white fox sighed. This kind of treasure of heaven and earth must have its own advantages for the human, demon, and ghost paths. There was no other way. It seemed that he still had to get a building foundation pill to build his foundation. She also didn't eat it when he asked the white fox, so she didn't know how it was done. She only knew that the bigger sects should have the recipe to refine the building foundation pill, and it wasn't an important secret. It seemed that the spirit grass used to refine the pill was quite hard to find. Yu Qianqiu was depressed. If he had known earlier, his relationship with the Clear Sky sect wouldn't have been so stiff. He couldn't just run back now. Wasn't that courting death? Not only was he depressed, Shi Xiaodian was also depressed. Only now did he find out that this martial uncle of his actually hadn't passed the building foundation stage, causing him to hold onto a pile of spirit stones and cultivate with all his might. In the end, even if Yu Qianqiu gave him more spirit stones, he wouldn't dare to absorb them anymore. Why? The true qi in his body had already reached the limit of the aura refining stage. If he absorbed any more, his body would explode. Who would dare to play with their lives? In the courtyard, the two of them looked at the pile of spirit stones and sighed. Although these things were good, what could they do? Where to get the building foundation pill became a headache. Suddenly, Yu Qianqiu shouted, "I got it!" Shi Xiaoyan's body trembled, and his eyes lit up. "Boss, you got away." Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, "Doesn't your big brother know some *T, celestial being? Go call your big brother over. I have something to ask him." Chapter 30. That's right. Shi Xiaodian slapped his forehead and ran out without saying anything else. After searching the residence, the servants said that the eldest young master had gone on an errand. He didn't want to wait any longer. He immediately ordered someone to prepare a horse and ran to the yamen where his eldest brother worked. He anxiously found his eldest brother. When the latter heard that it was Yu Qianqiu who was looking for him, he ran out without even asking for leave. As for the sedan chair that he used to work in, he didn't want to sit in it anymore. He untied the horse at the entrance of the yamen and disregarded the civil official's politeness. He got on the horse and galloped home. The way he got on the horse was very smooth. He was indeed the son of the pillar of the state general. He had a good upbringing. "Eldest brother, wait. That's my horse." Shi Xiaotian shouted at the entrance of the yamen. However, his eldest brother wouldn't hear him. Even if he did, he probably wouldn't come back. He had no choice but to let his eldest brother's sedan chair bearer carry him back. The servant of the general's residence was stunned when he saw Shi Yutian returning on a horse. He smiled and said, "The eldest young master is back." Shi Yutian jumped off the horse and threw the reins away. He didn't have the time to care about him. He ran to the backyard and was about to enter when he seemed to think of something. He held onto the wall and shouted excitedly, "Celestial Master, Shi Yutian is here." He was afraid that no one inside could hear him, so he shouted twice. Didn't he say he went on an errand? Why was he here so soon? Yu Qianqiu was slightly stunned. He then said politely, Yu Tian is here. Come in. He sounded like a senior talking to a junior. Sure, Yu Tian didn't care about this. He accepted the order and walked in as if it was a matter of course. With the permission of the Celestial Master, he didn't encounter the same situation as last time. His anxiety turned into joy. On the steps under the eaves, the Celestial Master was looking at him with a smile. Sure, Yu Tian was so excited that he couldn't speak. He knelt down and kowtowed continuously. What are you doing? I just want to ask you a question. Why are you so excited? I'm not even as old as you. Won't this shorten my life? Yu Qianqiu was a little dumbfounded. He didn't know that Sure Yu Tian would come before his younger brother could explain himself. He hurriedly walked down the steps and helped Sure Yu Tian up. He was so excited that his body trembled a little. Did your brother tell you everything? There is something I need your help with, Yu Qianqiu said with a smile. Sure Yu Tian nodded and shook his head. Yu Qianqiu frowned, not knowing what he meant. He hurriedly replied, Immortal Master, if there's anything you need, just tell me. As long as it's something I can help with, let alone one, even if it's 100 or 1,000, it's not a problem. That's good. Yu Qianqiu nodded in satisfaction and said with a smile, Last time, I heard that you wanted to become the disciple of an immortal. Where does that immortal live? Can you take me meet him? Sure Yu Tian hurriedly knelt down again and said, Please don't misunderstand, Immortal Master. I won't look for him again. I will follow you wholeheartedly from now on. With that, he kowtowed again. This unlucky child. His imagination was really strong, as expected of someone trained in officialdom. He didn't answer the question and always liked to kowtow. Yu Qianqiu was a little annoyed and shouted, All right, stand up. Sure Yu Tian was so scared that he stood up obediently and looked at him in fear. Yu Qianqiu said in a deep voice, I don't have any other meaning. I just want you to take me to him. I have something to do. Do you understand? He understood. So that was what was about. He squeezed out a smile and said, That immortal is in the Spirit Stone Temple 30 miles outside the city. He's called the Spirit Stone Immortal. I'll take you there now. Damn it. This guy was a donkey. He couldn't be polite. Yu Qianqiu grunted and thought to himself, Spirit Stone Immortal? He must have a lot of Spirit Stones. I don't know if he has as many as I do. The two of them walked to the entrance of the general's mansion. Sure Yu Tian had just ordered the servants to prepare a horse when Sure Xiao Tian arrived in a swaying sedan chair. He rolled his eyes at his big brother and asked for another horse. The three of them got on the horse. Sure Yu Tian led the way and ran out of the city. Out of the city, the three of them headed north. After running on the official road for a while, Sure Yu Tian led the two of them along a small path. Not long after, a dilapidated Taoist temple appeared on a small hill in front of them. When they reached the foot of the hill, Sure Yu Tian suddenly stopped his horse and pointed up. He said nervously, The immortal lives there. He's the master of the Taoist temple. He has a rule that people who go up the mountain are not allowed to ride on a sedan chair or on a horse. Otherwise, he won't meet them. The two of them looked at the small hill that was only a fart tall. They didn't expect there to be such a rule. They looked at each other. In the end, it was Yu Qianqiu who said with a smile, That's pretty awesome. It seems like he's really capable. Forget it. Let's follow the host. Let's go up. The three of them got down and tied their horses to a tree. They walked to the front of the Taoist temple. The door was closed. Yu Qianqiu gave Sure Yu Tian a look, asking him to knock on the door. The latter nodded and smiled bitterly. He walked to the door and knocked on the door. After a while, they heard footsteps from inside. The door creaked open and a Taoist child's head popped out. Sure Yu Tian said with a smile, Little master, could you please inform the master that? Before he could finish, the Taoist child said angrily, Why is it you again? My master said that he would never see you again. With that, the door was closed again. Sure Yu Tian was given the cold shoulder. He turned around and smiled at the two of them. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. I'll do it. Sure Xiao Tian knew about his brother and the Taoist temple. He knew that he had annoyed the person inside, so he went and knocked on the door. After knocking a few times, the Taoist child inside shouted, My master said that he won't be seeing any guests today. Sure Xiao Tian turned around and spread his palms innocently, indicating that there was nothing he could do. He then pointed to the wall. It seemed like he was asking if they should climb over the wall. Do I look like someone who would do that kind of sneaky thing? Yu Qianqiu sneered. He squinted his eyes and looked around. The Taoist temple was not big. It occupied a small hill. There was nothing special about the surroundings. He did not expect such a powerful cultivator to live here. Let me try. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the words Spirit Stone Temple on the Taoist temple. He walked to a millstone-sized blue stone opposite the door with his hands behind his back. The two brothers looked at each other, not knowing how he was going to knock. Damn it, I'm giving you face, but you don't want it. Yu Qianqiu cursed under his breath. He stretched out his hand and lifted the 100-pound blue stone. Before the two brothers could react, they heard him shout, "Get out here!" The blue stone in his hand flew into the wall. Bang! A loud sound came from the courtyard. Dust flew everywhere. Even standing outside, they could feel the ground shaking. The two brothers were dumbfounded. An angry voice came from inside. "Who dares to cause trouble in my Spirit Stone Temple? You bastard!" Yu Qianqiu replied in a loud voice. He hurriedly walked to the door of the Taoist temple and fiercely kicked it. With another bang, two pieces of the door directly flew in. "You're courting death." Following the angry shout, a figure jumped over the wall and flew out. As soon as the person landed, he saw Shi Yutian. He pointed at him and scolded. "So it's you again. How dare you bring people here to fight? Do you want to die?" After saying that, he glanced at the other two. Shi Yutian was already scared stiff by Yu Qianqiu's actions. When he heard the person's words, he quickly knelt down and kowtowed. "Immortal Master, please forgive me. Immortal Master, please forgive me." The younger brother saw his older brother's actions and frowned. He pulled him up and shouted, "Big brother, you're giving the general's residence too much face. Putting on such a big show. I was wondering what kind of bullshit immortal had such a high cultivation level. So it's just an old man at the 10th level." Yu Qianqiu laughed. With one look, he could tell that this person was also at the 10th level of the qi refining stage. The person who came had a sage-like appearance. He didn't look very old, about 40 years old. He had 3 long strands of beard, and his face was flushed. If he held the green dragon crescent blade in his hand, he would look like Guan Yu from the TV shows in his previous life. The person who came was the temple's master, Spirit Stone Immortal. He was shocked when he saw the other two. Needless to say, Shi Shaotian was also at the 10th level of the qi refining stage. However, he couldn't see through Yu Qianqiu. It didn't matter if he couldn't see through Yu Qianqiu's cultivation level. What was worse was that Yu Qianqiu could see through his cultivation level at a glance. This meant that Yu Qianqiu's cultivation level was higher than his. Moreover, both of them didn't look very old. To have such a cultivation level at such a young age, they must be disciples of some big sect. Although one couldn't judge one's age by appearance in the cultivation world, they were not people he could afford to offend. Thinking about this, the matter of him being hit by stones was already a small matter. Spirit Stone Immortal's expression changed. He quickly bowed to Yu Qianqiu and said, "I didn't know Senior was coming. Spirit Stone, please forgive me for my offense." Shi Yutian was stunned by Spirit Stone Immortal's respectful attitude. What would happen if even an immortal respected him? He looked at Yu Qianqiu with a fiery gaze. Being addressed as senior by such an old person was a little hard to accept. Yu Qianqiu thought about it and felt relieved. The cultivation world was a place where the strong preyed on the weak. Whoever was strong was awesome. Since the other party couldn't see through his cultivation level, it wasn't wrong to address him as senior. He smiled and said, "No need to be so polite. I have something to ask you." Spirit Stone Immortal nodded and said respectfully, "Senior, please come inside." Yu Qianqiu glanced at Shi Yutian, whose eyes were shining, and said to Lil Tian, "I'll be right back. You two wait for a moment." The two brothers agreed. Seeing how respectful their master was, the boy inside the door quickly ran back to prepare tea. The two brothers didn't wait for long outside the door. Suddenly, they heard the sound of fighting coming from inside. Shocked, Shi Shaotian flew into the courtyard. Chapter 31. Just as Xiaotian landed in the courtyard, a figure flew out of the Taoist temple's main hall and landed in front of him. When he saw who it was, he was shocked. It was none other than Yu Qianqiu. Xiaotian quickly helped him up. Then, Spirit Stone Immortal jumped out of the main hall's entrance. He pointed his sword at Yu Qianqiu and scolded. I was wondering which expert came to cause trouble. So it's also a level 10 Qi refinement cultivator. How dare you? Yu Tian, who had sneaked in, happened to see this scene. The thought that his master couldn't beat Spirit Stone Immortal appeared in his mind. Yu Qianqiu looked at his tattered robe and wiped the moisture from the corner of his mouth. The back of his finger was smeared with blood. He narrowed his eyes and sneered. When he and Spirit Stone entered, they were polite and asked some questions, and Spirit Stone Immortal answered them sincerely. It turned out that Spirit Stone Immortal had agreed to take Yu Tian as his disciple, but it wasn't because he had a cultivation bone. In fact, Yu Tian didn't have a spirit root. Spirit Stone Immortal only took a fancy to his identity and wanted to use him to do things in the secular world. Later, when he heard that there was an immortal hiding in his house, Spirit Stone Immortal immediately gave up on the idea. He was afraid of getting into trouble. Unexpectedly, this Spirit Stone had an extraordinary background. He was born in the Huaxia Empire's number 1 cultivation sect, the Supporting Immortal Island, and his grandfather was an elder of the Supporting Immortal Island. After his grandfather passed away, Supporting Immortal Island declined in his father's generation. Supporting Immortal Island was different from other sections. It had a strange rule. If a disciple failed 3 times in a row, they would be chased out of the sect to make a living on their own. Spirit Stone Immortal Island was chased out of Supporting Immortal Island and ended up here. Perhaps he was afraid that Yu Qianqiu would look down on him. He told Yu Qianqiu a secret. Although he wasn't doing well now, it was still possible for him to return to Supporting Immortal Island. Because his grandfather was an elder, he had a Supporting Immortal Medallion. This was something only elders and above had. Anyone with a spirit root could use the token to join the Supporting Immortal Island. However, the token could only be used once before it was taken away. Thus, he wanted to see if there was a chance for him to reach the Foundation establishment stage outside before going back. Otherwise, if he ran back rashly and failed to reach the Foundation establishment stage next time, he would be chased out again. Then, he would not have a chance to go back anymore. Yu Qianqiu had just escaped from Ongquansong. He had no place to get Foundation Building Dawn, so he came here to inquire about Foundation Building Dawn. Now that he heard that this guy actually had Foundation Building Dawn, how could he not be happy? He then asked Yu Qianqiu if anyone could join Fushin Island with a token. Spirit Stone did not suspect anything, as he had already determined that Yu Qianqiu was a disciple of some other sect. He confidently told Yu Qianqiu that Fushin Island only recognized the token and not the person. Yu Qianqiu was delighted. He asked Spirit Stone if he could give the immortal supporting token to him. When Spirit Stone heard this, he got a huge shock and scolded himself for talking too much. However, he was afraid that Yu Qianqiu would snatch it from him, so he tactfully refused. Spirit Stone's guess was right. Yu Qianqiu really had the intention to rob him. Seeing that soft talk didn't work, he could only force it from Spirit Stone. However, this immortal supporting token was Spirit Stone's last hope of joining the Supporting Immortal Island. Naturally, he was unwilling to give it to Spirit Stone. One wanted it forcefully, while the other didn't. The two of them finally started fighting. Because Spirit Stone couldn't see through Yu Qianqiu's cultivation, he was rather afraid at first. He resisted with all his might. After a few moves, he was shocked to discover that Yu Qianqiu was only Qi refinement level 10. Spirit Stone's confidence was greatly boosted. Only then did Yu Qianqiu realize that although their cultivation levels were similar, Spirit Stone's battle experience in the cultivation world was far from Spirit Stone's. Hence, the scene that Xiaotian and his brother saw happened. "Boss, let me do it." Xiaotian stared at Spirit Stone. "Hee. No need, you stand to the side." Yu Qianqiu sneered and pushed Xiaotian away. In his subconscious, he was still the boss of the underworld. Since he was the boss, if he couldn't win and let his lackeys fight, then he wouldn't be able to survive in the future. Spirit Stone's confidence was greatly boosted. Young man, I'll give you a chance. Go back and improve your cultivation before coming back. Just as Yu Qianqiu was about to scold him back, he suddenly felt his dantian heat up. He secretly circulated his energy to check and saw that the golden pearl in his dantian was emitting a golden glow. His whole body suddenly became warm. The meridians that were broken by the palm strike were actually slowly healing. So the golden pearl had such a magical effect. It was indeed a good item. Yu Qianqiu, who had calmed down, stared at the sword in his hand. This was the sword that his master, Hao Sansi, had given to him. This was the first time he used it in a fight. He had clashed a few times just now, but there wasn't even a scratch on it. The quality was indeed good. It just didn't feel as smooth as the machete from his previous life. Damn it! What bullsh *T cultivators. Today, he had finally experienced it. If one's cultivation hadn't reached the foundation building stage, fighting was no different from fighting with mortals. They couldn't fly, and it was even more impossible for them to casually swing their swords like the white fox. If they used all their strength, they might be able to use the move air splitting palm, but the opponent wouldn't just stand there and let you chop them. I don't believe that I, your father, was considered an expert in one-on-one fights and group fights in my previous life. Today, I won't be able to defeat you. Thinking of this, he pointed the sword in his hand at Spirit Stone and coldly said, I'll ask you again, are you going to give me the item or not? Spirit Stone was stunned. He couldn't win, yet he still dared to be stubborn. He couldn't help but laugh evilly. You really don't know life from death. I gave you a chance, but you don't want it. Then, you can stay here and don't leave. After he finished speaking, he fiercely pounced forward and stabbed with his sword. Meeting on a narrow path, the courageous wins. A phrase flashed in Yu Qianqiu's mind. With a sigh, he swung his sword to block the sword that was stabbing at him. Immediately, he held the sword with both hands and used all his strength to wildly hack at it. The long sword whistled through the air as it chopped down. Spirit Stone was slightly startled. He raised his sword to block the attack and dodged to the side. Clang! He suddenly felt his palm go numb from the impact, and his sword almost fell out of his hand. He quickly took a few steps back. However, the other party followed up as if he didn't care about his life. He held the sword with both hands like it was a knife and hacked at Spirit Stone in a frenzy. Yu Qianqiu chased after Spirit Stone, who was dodging all over the place. His sword wanted nothing more than to hack him in half. Clang, clang, clang. The long swords clashed nonstop. Sure Xiaotian, who was originally secretly worried for Yu Qianqiu, was dumbfounded. Today, he finally understood a principle. So, sword could be used like this. Boss's sword dance was astonishing. It was simply unforgettable after seeing it. It was like a torrential storm of attacks without any regard for his life. Sure Yu Tian, who was hiding at the side, was also a little dumbfounded. So this was how immortals fought. They didn't seem to be much different from the hooligans on the street. They didn't have any of the legendary elegance at all. He couldn't help but ask himself, even if I could cultivate in the future, would I be able to do this? In an instant, his heart turned gloomy, and his thoughts of cultivating became colder. Spirit Stone, who was full of confidence just a moment ago, suddenly felt miserable after a few moves. He had never seen someone fight with a sword like this. The hand that was holding the sword was almost unable to hold it. It was a pity that he had never practiced using his left hand. Otherwise, he could switch to using his left hand. That way, he would be able to hold on for a while longer. Spirit Stone fled in all directions in the courtyard. He really couldn't hide anymore, so he swung his sword to block once. However, something happened that made him tremble with fear. He had unknowingly hidden in a dead corner between two side rooms. The hand that was holding the sword was already trembling from the impact. He couldn't help but be scared out of his wits. He thought to himself, "My life is over. Don't you dare hurt my master." The voice of a boy came from behind Yu Qianqiu. The boy raised a big iron rod that was used to strike a bell and fiercely smashed it towards Yu Qianqiu's head. Yu Qianqiu took a moment to take a look. He turned around and slashed with his sword. The iron rod, that was made of ordinary iron, was immediately split into two. How could the boy have the strength to hold something so strong? After the web between his thumb and index finger was split open, he was immediately dumbfounded when he saw the thing on the ground. Yu Qianqiu shouted, "Scram!" Then he flew over and kicked the boy's abdomen. "Ah!" The boy screamed, and his body flew up. While he was still in the air, he spat out a mouthful of blood. When he hit the ground, he spat out another mouthful of blood and fainted on the spot. The faces of the two Shi brothers twitched. They didn't think that Yu Qianqiu wouldn't even let a child go. This was too cruel. Shi Xiaoyan's eyes flashed, and he suddenly shouted, "Boss, be careful." Although the boy didn't succeed in his sneak attack, he had bought time for his master. Ling Shi saw that Yu Qianqiu had kicked his disciple away, and it just so happened that Yu Qianqiu's back was facing him. He instantly felt that this opportunity couldn't be missed, and he fiercely stabbed with his sword. Hearing Shi Xiaoyan's warning, Yu Qianqiu didn't see what was happening behind him. He could easily guess what Ling Shi was going to do. He loudly shouted, "Go to hell!" He fiercely swung his sword and turned around. Immediately, he saw his opponent's long sword stabbing towards his abdomen. A hint of fierceness flashed in his eyes. Ignoring the sword that was stabbing towards him, he gripped his sword with both hands and ruthlessly chopped at his opponent's head. "No!" Shi Xiaoyan couldn't help but scream when he saw that his boss was going to suffer serious injuries, even if he didn't die. He still wanted to take his opponent's life. However, he didn't know that Ling Shi was even more shocked. He thought that even if he couldn't kill his opponent, he could still force him to retreat and create an opportunity for himself to escape. However, this guy was simply a lunatic and didn't care about life or death at all. "I have a feud with you for killing my father. Is it worth it for you to do this?" As this thought flashed through his mind, Ling Shi hurriedly withdrew his sword and fiercely retreated. Bang! Yu Qianqiu went berserk. He couldn't control his sword, and the corner of the wall on one side of the room collapsed, nearly burying Ling Shi. The latter trembled with fear as he looked behind him. There was no way out anymore. In front of him, Yu Qianqiu stepped on the collapsed brick wall and passed through the rising dust. Wielding his sword, he pressed forward with a murderous aura. "Fight!" Ling Shi fiercely brandished his sword and stabbed forward. A cold light flashed before his eyes, and with a clang, the sword in his hand trembled. Then, it disappeared without a trace. A cold sword was placed against his neck. "Stop! I'll give it to you!" Ling Shi hurriedly shouted. Yu Qianqiu cackled and said, "Even if I kill you, the item will still be mine." Ling Shi bitterly smiled. "If you kill me, I guarantee that you won't be able to find it. The item has been hidden by me." Yu Qianqiu frowned and stared at Ling Shi for a while. Suddenly, he withdrew the sword against Ling Shi's neck and said coldly, "Stop wasting time. Hand over the item, and I won't kill you." Chapter 32. Ling Shi was stunned. He didn't expect his opponent to agree so easily. He asked in astonishment, "Aren't you afraid that I'll run away?" "Run? You can try. I can also guarantee that you will suffer a fate worse than death." Yu Qianqiu snorted disdainfully and impatiently said, "Take out the item. I don't want to repeat myself a third time." Ling Shi sighed. No matter how good the item was, it wasn't as important as his life. After thinking about it, he didn't have the confidence that he could escape. He could only nod silently and step on the collapsed bricks as he walked out. Yu Qianqiu retreated and stared at him coldly. Although he said that he would let his opponent go, he still maintained a certain level of vigilance. He followed Ling Shi to the main hall and looked around. The Taoist temple was simple and didn't have many decorations. In the center, there was a deity worshipped, but he couldn't recognize who it was. A large praying mat below attracted Yu Qianqiu's attention. His eyelids twitched as he thought to himself, could the immortal supporting token be hidden here? While Ling Shi was still sighing, Yu Qianqiu took a few steps forward and grabbed the praying mat. The former's expression instantly changed. "Hua!" The praying mat was torn apart, and 2 items fell to the ground. The buckwheat husks inside were scattered all over the ground. Yu Qinshu glanced at Ling Shi and slowly picked up the 2 items. At this moment, Shi Xiaotian also came in. His boss's ferocity just now was deeply engraved in his heart, but he didn't know why his boss would fight with his life on the line. Seeing Yu Qinshu playing with the 2 items in his hands, and then looking at Ling Shi's reluctant gaze, Shi Xiaotian's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that boss is fighting so hard just to snatch other people's items? Yu Qinshu carefully examined the items in his hands. The 2 items were a wooden token and a jade plate. The wooden token was simple and unadorned, and its sides were engraved with patterns. On one side, the words "supporting immortals" were engraved. On the other side, the image of an island was engraved. Releasing his divine sense to investigate, he could feel a roaming wave of true qi. Clearly, it was injected by someone. Needless to say, this was the so-called supporting immortals token. The words "100 Flowers Valley" were engraved on the Jade archive. There was also a surge of Jinqi that had been channeled into the Jade archive. There was nothing special about the rest of it, and no one knew what it was used for. Yu Qinshu looked at the Spirit Stone and asked, "What is this thing used for?" Spirit Stone didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He didn't expect that the thing he had spent so much effort to hide would be found out so quickly. He had thought that no one would notice where he had hidden it. Hearing Yu Qinshu's question and looking at the thing in his hand, he was slightly taken aback. "You don't even know about the 100 Flowers Valley? Is it famous?" Holding the Jade archive, Yu Qinshu gave Shi Xiaotian a questioning look. The latter also shook his head, indicating that he didn't know. He couldn't help but ask in a deep voice, "Am I asking you? Or are you asking me?" Spirit Stone was taken aback. He thought to himself that he had tolerated it. It was his own fault for not being able to defeat Shi Xiaotian. Sighing, he explained, "This is the entrance token to the 100 Flowers Valley. The 100 Flowers Valley is a marketplace for cultivators of the Huaxia Empire. As long as you can afford it, you can buy almost anything there. You can also exchange items for items of similar value." "Oh, that's a good place. Give me the 100 Flowers token as well," Yu Qinshu said indifferently. "Ah," Spirit Stone exclaimed. "What's the use of my 100 Flowers token? This thing is just a proof to avoid being interrogated when entering the 100 Flowers Valley in the future. Any cultivator who enters or exits the 100 Flowers Valley, regardless of their level, can register and claim it. It's useless to take someone else's token." "I see." Yu Qinshu nodded and asked, "Where are the locations of Fuxian Island and the 100 Flowers Valley?" You don't even know this?" Spirit Stone looked at him as if he was looking at an idiot. He really wondered if Yu Qinshu was a cultivator. "What? You have a problem with that? Don't you know what it means to be shameless, to ask your subordinates?" Although Yu Qinshu said so, he was also lamenting in his heart that he was indeed inexperienced. He was a complete rookie in the cultivation world. Rolling his eyes at Spirit Stone, he thought to himself, "This guy's a little useful." Spirit Stone decided not to say it. He thought, "Whatever you say is right. Why should I ask for a rebuff?" Yu Qinshu rubbed his chin and paced around. He thought for a while and said to Shi Xiaotian, "Xiaotian, I'm leaving. Where are you going?" "The 100 Flowers Valley or Fuxian Island." "I'm going too," Shi Xiaotian said. Yu Qinshu smiled and said, "There's only one Fuxian token. You go back first. After I find the Foundation establishment pill, I'll come find you. Don't worry, I won't forget you." Shi Xiaotian was silent. After a long time, he nodded and said, "I understand. I'll wait for you. Boss, be careful." After that, he walked out of the main hall and called his big brother, who was hiding at the side. Spirit Stone saw the boy lying on the ground. He went to check, but there was no breath. Yu Qinshu kicked him to death. Spirit Stone shook his head and sighed. "Is he dead?" Yu Qinshu asked indifferently. Spirit Stone nodded his head heavily. It could be seen that he wasn't very sad. To a cultivator, killing a commoner wasn't a big deal. Yu Qinshu weighed the 100 Flowers token in his hand and handed it over with a smile. He said, I'll return it to you. Ling Shi stood up, his gaze lingering on the other immortal supporting medallion. He shook his head helplessly and extended his hand to accept the 100-flower medallion. Suddenly, his wrist tightened. The hand that was handing over the medallion had already grabbed his wrist. Ling Shi turned pale with fright and shouted angrily, "You didn't keep your word." Before he could finish speaking, his vision suddenly blurred, and the scene changed. After pulling Spirit Stone into the golden pearl, Yu Qianqiu laughed and let go of him. Spirit Stone looked around and shouted, "Where is this? Let me out." Yu Qianqiu shook his head and said, "You should feel honored. This is my territory. Ordinary people don't have the fortune to enter. You untrustworthy and despicable person. You promised that as long as I handed over the Fuxian token, you would let me go. Why did you imprison me?" Spirit Stone pointed his finger and cursed. No, you're mistaken. Don't you think that I did what I promised you?" Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said with a smile, "First, I only said that I wouldn't kill you if you handed over the token. I didn't say that I would let you go. That's why you're still alive and well. Second, you didn't hand over the token. I found it myself. If you think about it carefully, you will know that I wasn't talking nonsense. Just based on this, I won't be breaking my promise if I kill you. Sophistry, I will fight you to the death." Spirit Stone Immortal roared and fiercely pounced over, fiercely hacking his palm towards Yu Qianqiu. The latter smiled and disappeared. Spirit Stone missed. A mocking laugh came from behind him. "If I want to kill you, it will be as easy as flipping my hand. If you want to kill me, it will be as difficult as ascending to heaven. So, I advise you not to waste your energy." Spirit Stone was so angry that he cried out. He turned and pounced at Yu Qianqiu again. However, no matter what he did, Yu Qianqiu always disappeared with a smile. This went on for a long time. Suddenly, Spirit Stone seemed to think of something. He looked at Yu Qianqiu and shouted, "Form displacement transposition? Is this the form displacement transposition that only a cultivator at the end of the crossing tribulation stage can use? How is this possible? Could it be that you have been hiding your cultivation? No, this is impossible." Although Spirit Stone said it was impossible, after he calmed down, he felt a little afraid. Regardless of whether this was really form displacement transposition, with Shao Chen's cultivation, killing him would be as easy as flipping his hand. It turned out that Shao Chen had been playing with him in the Taoist temple. Thinking of this, Spirit Stone's heart turned cold. Finally, he lowered his hands, no longer thinking of fighting with his life on the line. Of course, Yu Qianqiu wouldn't tell him that he could go wherever he wanted here. He smiled mysteriously and said, "In knowing that it's impossible but not doing it. This is what a smart person would do. Spirit Stone Immortal, go over there and see what's over there." After saying that, he pointed at a mountain of cloth bags. Spirit Stone raised his head and looked in the direction he was pointing. He looked at Shao Chen suspiciously. In the end, he walked to the foot of the mountain. Many of the cloth bags were open, revealing spirit stones. It was as if they were things that no one wanted and were casually thrown there. Could this mountain be made of spirit stones? Spirit Stone Immortal was shocked. He had never seen so many spirit stones before. Yu Qianqiu suddenly appeared beside him and said with a smile, "That's right. These are all spirit stones. They're all mine. Now you should know which one of us is worthy of being called Spirit Stone Immortal." Spirit Stone Immortal was now completely convinced. He couldn't beat Shao Chen in a fight, but Shao Chen could use money to crush him. He couldn't help but reveal an embarrassed expression. He said embarrassedly, "My name is Ji Wushuang. After I left supporting Immortal Island, I wandered into Spirit Stone Temple. That's why people respectfully called me Spirit Stone Immortal." There are some things that he didn't say. After he chased away the original owner of Spirit Stone Temple, he became Spirit Stone Immortal. Yu Qianqiu kept staring at Spirit Stone Immortal's expression. He was very satisfied with the current effect. This was the effect he wanted when he brought Spirit Stone Immortal here. Yu Qianqiu had no experience in the cultivation world, so he needed such a person to be his follower. As for Spirit Stone Immortal's trivial matters, he couldn't be bothered. Yu Qianqiu frowned and said, "What's Spirit Stone Immortal? Chicken is peerless and duck is peerless. It sounds so bad. I'll change your name. I guarantee it will sound better than now." "Change my name?" Spirit Stone Immortal asked in astonishment. "Why? You don't want to?" Yu Qianqiu shouted in a deep voice. Spirit Stone Immortal shook his head silently. He didn't agree, but he also didn't say that he didn't agree. Anyone would feel uncomfortable changing their name again and again. Yu Qianqiu stared at Spirit Stone Immortal's red face and 3 strands of long beard. He blushed and said, "From now on, you'll be called Guan Yu." Guan Yu's courtesy name is Yunchang. It means Guan as in gate, Yu as in feather, Yun as in white cloud, and long as in long. What do you think of this name? Guan Yu courtesy name is Yunchang. Spirit Stone Immortal couldn't figure out why he chose this name. He muttered a few times, but couldn't find anything special about it. He was puzzled and asked, "Why did you choose this name?" Yu Qianqiu chuckled and made a mighty pose of wielding the green dragon crescent blade. He said, "Don't you think this name is very mighty, very bold, and very weighty?" Spirit Stone Immortal shook his head and muttered, "I can't tell. Guan Yu, how weighty can a feather be? Looks like this guy isn't too satisfied." Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and chuckled. He said, "As long as you promise to use this name in the future, I can also guarantee that you will succeed in building your foundation within 10 years. "Really?" Spirit Stone Immortal's eyes lit up. He said happily, "As long as you can really help me succeed in building my foundation within 10 years, I promise that I will never change my name from now on, Guan Yu. If I can't do it, I will naturally change my name back." "Haha, it's a deal. It's a deal." Both of them laughed loudly. Yu Qianqiu happily patted his shoulder and said, "Guan Yu, from now on, you will follow me well. I guarantee that you will eat and drink well every day. Sooner or later, you will cultivate to the tribulation passing stage." Spirit Stone nodded and smiled. He didn't know why this guy was so happy just because he changed his name. Sigh. Sure enough, experts all have some strange hobbies. Yu Qianqiu was very pleased. In his previous life, he had offered countless incense sticks to Second Master Guan and kowtowed countless times, but in the end, he still died. Now, he got Guan Yu as his follower. He believed that he would definitely be very impressive when he went out. "No, when we go out, I have to order a set of green robes and a green hat for him to wear. Then I have to carry a long sword on my waist and hold the hilt of the sword in my hand while following behind me. This way, I will look impressive, scary, and awesome when I go out." Chapter 33. Although he was pleased with himself, he did not believe that a few simple promises could completely subdue a person. It was necessary to use the necessary methods. He still had to ask the white fox about this. With a thought, the entire space within the golden bead appeared in his mind, including every blade of grass and every tree. After reaching the 10th level of Qi refining, the territory inside the golden bead had expanded by dozens of times. What made Yu Qianqiu pleasantly surprised was that small streams and lakes began to appear in his territory. Because of this, he purposely got a lot of different kinds of fish to raise: birds, beasts, flowers, and plants. The bamboo pavilion was empty. Sister Bai must have gone to play with the flowers and plants again. It was already slowly changing. This is a good thing. The corner of Yu Qianqiu's mouth slightly curled up, revealing a smile. His thoughts changed. In a flower bed, the white fox in snow-white clothes was squatting in the flower bed, pulling out the weeds. Guan Yu held a pile of high-grade spirit stones and smacked her lips, asking, "I still haven't asked how I should address you." "Yu Qianqiu, you can call me boss from now on." Yu Qianqiu replied, then immediately said, "Wait here, I'll be back soon." After saying that, his figure disappeared. Guan Yu did not deny it and sneered, "Yu Qianqiu, boss. Beauty, pulling out the weeds again." Yu Qianqiu suddenly appeared beside the white fox in the flower bed. The latter seemed to be used to this. She did not even raise her head and was still busy with her work. She only frowned and asked, "Why did you bring someone in again?" "Sister, don't be offended. It's just that the territory is getting bigger and bigger, so I specially found someone to plant trees." Yu Qianqiu casually replied. The white fox did not say anything else. The former squatted beside her and smiled. "Sister, let me ask you something. I want to control someone and make him loyal to me. Do you have any ideas?" The white fox stopped what she was doing and frowned. "Who do you want to control?" "Hey, it's this guy I brought in. Just now, we were fighting with our lives on the line outside. Your little brother, almost died in his hands. I brought him in here. If he can't beat me, he'll surrender. But who knows if he's sincere or just pretending?" Yu Qianqiu said worriedly. White Fox's complexion changed when she heard that her brother had almost been killed. She raised her beautiful face and saw that the corner of Yu Qianqiu's mouth was clearly stained with blood. His clothes were also torn. It was obvious that he had fought with someone and was injured. She immediately snorted coldly and disappeared. Yu Qianqiu was startled. Suddenly, a scream came from afar. While he was still in shock, the white fox appeared out of nowhere with a low-grade spirit stone in her hand. She said coldly, "I've trapped his yuanshin here. You can use it without worry. If he dares to have any other thoughts, I'll make him suffer a fate worse than death." After he finished speaking, a ball of flames appeared in his hand and wrapped around the spirit stone. Immediately, a series of wails came from afar. The flames disappeared, and the wailing stopped. The white fox placed the spirit stones into the small sachet on its waist. "Oh my God, so powerful!" Luckily, he didn't do anything to Sister White. Otherwise, if he did, it would be fun. Yu Qianqiu's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He smiled awkwardly. "Sister, you're really good. I wonder if you could teach me. If your cultivation hasn't reached the original infant stage, you can't forcefully extract other people's yuan shun. Also, the caster's cultivation must be higher than the caster's unless the caster is willing to give up their yuan shun." After the white fox finished speaking, she squatted down and continued with her work. Hee, I'll go see how he's doing." Seeing that she ignored him, Yu Qianqiu glanced at the white robe wrapped around her buttocks. Because she was working, his little heart skipped a beat. He thought to himself, "What a sexy buttocks." His figure suddenly disappeared. Guan Yu's red face had already turned pale. He sat on the ground and stared blankly at Yu Qianqiu's appearance. He scrambled to hug his thigh and trembled. There's a woman here who forcefully extracted my yuan shan." "Yu Qianqiu, no. Boss, do you know her? Help me beg her to return my yuan shan." Guan Yu was indeed scared out of his wits. When the woman in white first appeared, he was still amazed by her beauty. Who would have thought that the sudden burst of aura would force him to the point that he could not even move? She placed one hand on his head and easily pulled out his natal primordial spirit. The pain was simply worse than death. He was very clear that if his yuan shun was controlled by someone, it meant that his life was in someone else's hands. If that person was unhappy, he wouldn't even be able to run. Yu Qianqiu cried out in alarm. "Your natal primordial spirit was also extracted." Guan Yu's trembling body stopped. He slowly raised his head and said in shock, "Is your yuan shin also AI?" "Who said it wasn't?" Yu Qianqiu shook his head and helped Guan Yu up. "But you don't need to worry. She's my big sister. Since you're one of my people now, I can guarantee that you won't be in danger with your primordial spirit trapped in her hands." "What? She's your sister?" Guan Yu screamed and pushed him away. He shouted, "She's your sister. Of course you don't have to worry. It must be you and your brother who conspired to kill me. I'll kill you." Guan Yu just waved his palm and took a step forward. The muscles on his face twisted and he fell to the ground with a bang. A miserable scream came from his throat. He rolled around on the ground, looking extremely painful. Even Yu Qianqiu couldn't stand it anymore. The white fox's voice came from the air. "If you dare to have any evil intentions towards my brother again, I'll make your life worse than death." "I won't dare." Guan Yu used all his strength to choke out. Then, his body loosened and he laid on the ground again. It was indeed a good way to control people. But he couldn't discourage him from doing things for him in the future. Yu Qianqiu stared at him. After confirming that he was fine, he sighed. Yinchang, you're too impulsive. Do you still remember that 10th level Qi refining cultivator who called me boss? Just like you, his Yuan Shun was also extracted by my sister. But he knew how to behave. He knew that my sister liked to take care of flowers and plants. Look at the flowers and trees here. They were all done by him. Guess what happened in the end? My sister was happy and returned his Yuan Shun. Now he's alive and well. Yinchang, you're worth learning from. Guan Yu, who had been staring at him with dead fish eyes, moved his eyeballs. There was some spirit in them. His Adam's apple trembled as he said, "You're not lying to me?" He struggled to get up. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes at him and snorted. Do I look like the kind of person who would lie to people so easily? Guan Yu's gaze fell on the forest. He realized that those trees were indeed not native. There were obviously traces of them being transplanted. He nodded thoughtfully. Do you know why I named you Guan Yu? Yu Qianqiu asked. Seeing him shake his head, he asked again, do you know that there are other empires outside of the Huaxia Empire? The latter nodded, indicating that he knew. He asked again, then have you been there? The latter still shook his head. Yu Qianqiu heaved a sigh of relief. He sighed. Let me tell you a story. In the Far East, there was an empire whose regime had decayed. There was a scene of warlords fighting for power. At that time, there were 3 heroes named Liu Bei, Guan Yu, and Zhang Fei. The 3 of them became sworn brothers in the Peach Garden. Guan Yu beheaded Yan Liang and Wen Chou. Guan Yu was in the Chao camp, but his heart was in the Han camp. Guan Yu protected his sister-in-law 1,000 miles away, overcame 5 passes, and beheaded 6 generals. Guan Yu dragged his blade to subdue Huang Zhong. Guan Yu went to the battle alone. Guan Yu Maicheng. Let's not talk about it. Anyway, in the end, Guan Yu became a well-known hero in the empire. He was a courageous and loyal hero. Every family offered incense and worshipped him, and people called him Second Master Guan. After he finished, he thought to himself that it was a close call. He almost told them about how Guan Yu was beheaded. Seeing Yu Qianqiu narrate the story so vividly, Guan Yu's chest heaved. He stood up and stared at Yu Qianqiu, scaring the latter. He said slowly, "You're not lying to me, are you? Is there really such a hero? What? Am I the kind of person who would lie to others? I swear to God, if I made up Guan Yu's story, I curse myself to be struck by lightning and die a horrible death." Yu Qianqiu patted his chest and swore. He thought to himself, I don't know if Guan Yu's story is true or not, but I definitely didn't make it up. Since there really is such a heroic person, it's not wrong for me to take his name. It's also fitting. From now on, I'll be called Guan Yu Guan Yinchang. After he finished, he stroked his long beard and made a signature gesture of the Guan family that Yu Qianqiu had mentioned. It was quite similar. Chapter 34. Don't talk about useless things. Guan Yinchang did it, not said it. Yu Qianqiu pulled Miao Yi out of the golden pearl and back to the Taoist temple of spirit stones. He took out the Jade archive and handed it to Miao Yi, saying, First, take me to 100 Flowers Valley for a stroll. Guan Yu took it and saw that the Taoist priest was about to leave. He heaved a long sigh and said, Wait. Then he walked over to the boy who had been dead for a long time and carried him to the back of the hall to bury him. Yu Qianqiu nodded, thinking that he had some humanity. When the 2 of them reached the foot of the mountain, they found the horse still tied under the tree. Yu Qianqiu untied the reins and mounted it, saying, Follow me. Then he urged the horse to gallop. You want me to run on a horse? Guan Yu's red face was clouded, but his primordial spirit was in the hands of his sister, so he didn't dare to act rashly. He raised his Jinqi to the limit, leaped up, and followed. Yu Qianqiu didn't lead him anywhere else but back to the capital. They didn't go back to the Pillar of State General's mansion, though. The 2 of them changed out of their tattered clothes and redressed themselves. At Guan Yu's request, Yu Qianqiu spent a lot of effort to dress him up as the Guan Yu from the 3 kingdoms. Guan Yu stood there with a green hat and green robes, a long sword at his waist, and his hand on the hilt of the sword. What imposing sight! Yu Qianqiu's eyes shone with a strange light. He really was a living Yinchang Guan. But when he thought about how this Guan Yu used to be a Taoist priest and swindled people, he couldn't help but laugh. The owner of the tailor's shop couldn't help but praise, "Sir, you have a good look." Guan Yu couldn't contain his joy and called for the owner to bring him a bronze mirror. As expected, a red-faced Guan Yu appeared in the mirror, wearing a green robe and a green hat, holding a long sword in his hand. His eyes were closed, but he didn't look angry. He almost couldn't recognize himself. After exiting the tailor's shop, Guan Yu followed beside Yu Qianqiu. He was secretly trying to figure out Yun Chang's unparalleled demeanor that boss had mentioned. He held the hilt of his sword and walked forward with his head held high and chest puffed out. When the passers-by saw this, they all looked over and whispered, "This person really looks mighty and extraordinary." Guan Yu's gaze was even more focused. Yu Qianqiu turned his head and took a glance. He was overjoyed and thought to himself, "Who's as awesome as I am?" Leading Guan Yu around on the streets. The two of them arrived at the horse market and wanted to buy a horse. After walking around the horse market a few times, Guan Yu still couldn't find a horse that he was satisfied with. Yu Qianqiu became a little impatient and shouted, "Is there a need to go through so much trouble to choose a transportation tool?" Guan Yu stroked his long beard and said slowly, "Didn't you say that Yun Chang's horse is called Red Rabbit, and that it's a precious horse that can travel 1,000 miles in a day? Of course I have to choose a good horse." Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes at him and felt a toothache. He blamed himself for reaping what he sowed and was completely speechless. In the end, they really couldn't find that so-called precious horse, so they could only choose a healthy one. Guan Yu sighed endlessly. The two of them got on the horse and went straight out of the city gate, leaving a trail of dust behind them. It was troublesome that he hadn't reached the foundation building stage. Otherwise, if he could fly on a sword, he wouldn't have to go through the pain of running around for days. 10 days later, Guan Yu led Yu Qianqiu to a forest deep in the mountains. Looking around, the mountain road ahead was rugged. It was already impossible to travel on a horse. Yu Qianqiu jumped off the horse and pointed to the depths of the clouds in front of them. He asked, "Is that the 100 Flowers Valley? It doesn't look like it. It's impossible to see people in the clouds." Guan Yu also got off the horse and smiled. After spending a few days with Yu Qianqiu, he found that he wasn't the kind of person that was hard to get along with, so he felt a lot more at ease. He explained, "If anyone could see Bai Hua's sect, then wouldn't it be troublesome? Wouldn't even those normal people be able to come and go as they please?" Bai Hua Palace set up a big formation in the 100 Flowers Valley. The clouds are only a distraction, mainly to stop normal people from going in and out. "Let's go." "But what about these two horses?" "What? Are you going to send them to your parents? Just leave them here." Yu Qianqiu laughed mockingly. Guan Yu stroked his beard and pondered for a while. Then, he pulled out the long sword from his waist and broke the reins of the two horses. He removed the saddles and slashed the horses' buttocks twice. The two horses neighed in pain and ran into the deep mountains without any restraint. "Huh, you're quite kind, but there are probably quite a lot of ferocious beasts in this forest. I don't know if they'll be able to live past today." Yu Qianqiu shook his head. Guan Yu was surprised by his words. He looked at the direction the horses ran in and said in a low voice, "They better pray for themselves. This isn't something we can handle. Come on, let's go up the mountain." Before he could finish his words, the sound of horses neighing could be heard, and the two horses ran back. Guan Yu was a bit dumbfounded. Yu Qianqiu laughed. "These horses are used to being tamed. They can't survive in the wild. They'll probably run back in fear as soon as they smell the feces of ferocious beasts. Forget it, I'll just be a bit kind." Saying so, he walked up to the two horses and touched them. The two horses disappeared. Seeing that Guan Yu was still in a daze, he waved his hand and said, "What are you spacing out for? Let's go. I've already sent them to my sister's place." Guan Yu shook his head and said, "I'm not in a daze. I'm just wondering who you and your sister are, and where exactly does your sister live?" After saying that, he walked up the mountain with a face full of disbelief. "I'll let you know when I get the chance. Tell me what's going on with this Bai Hua Palace." Yu Qianqiu followed. Bai Hua Sect was founded not too long ago, less than 200 years ago. Speaking of which, it has something to do with supporting Immortals Island. Bai Hua sect leader, Bai Hua Fairy, was originally the daughter of the previous island lord of supporting Immortals Island. Unexpectedly, she married Yin Bugue, the son of the previous palace lord of the number 1 demonic sect, the 10,000 Demons. It caused quite a bit of trouble at the time. On one side was the number 1 righteous sect, and on the other side was the number 1 demonic sect. Under the pressure from both sides, the 2 sect leaders expelled the couple from their sects, and they both stepped down from their positions. It was here that the couple established their sect, establishing Bai Hua Palace. Bai Hua Palace can be considered as an anomaly in the cultivation world. You can't say that it's righteous, nor can you say that it's demonic. Yet both the righteous and demonic sects have to give it some face. Because of this, the 100 Flowers Valley, where Bai Hua Palace is located, has become a trading ground for the cultivation world. Both the righteous and demonic sects don't dare to cause any trouble here, and each goes about their own business. Don't you think it's strange? Hee, that's interesting. I'll have to take a good look. Yu Qianqiu laughed. The two of them chatted as they walked, winding their way into the depths of the mountain mist. The thick mist in a mountain was very strange. It didn't disperse even when the wind blew. The two of them stopped in front of the thick mist. Guan Yu took out a Jade archive and imbued it with his true qi. The Jade archive shot out a beam of white light towards the depths of the mist. The thick mist immediately roiled, gradually parting to reveal a path. Guan Yu instructed, "Don't run around. Just follow the path." The two of them walked along the path, and the mist behind them slowly closed up again. Yu Qianqiu was secretly amazed. Even the most advanced technology in his past life would have a hard time achieving this, right? Not long after, a city gate that wasn't too big appeared in front of them. Several cultivators armed with weapons stood guard at the gate. The cultivators glanced at the two of them, but didn't say anything. However, Guan Yu pulled Yu Qianqiu over and said, "Fellow Taoists, this is my friend's first time here. He needs a 100 flowers entrance token." A cultivator sitting behind a table glanced at Yu Qianqiu, then flipped open the booklet on the table. He picked up a brush and asked, "Name? Which sect?" "Yu Qianqiu. I'm a loose cultivator with no sect or sect." Yu Qianqiu answered unhurriedly. Before coming here, Guan Yu had already informed him. Of course, he couldn't possibly say that he was Ong Kuangsung's disciple. 100 flowers entrance token, 1 mid-grade spirit stone, or 100 low-grade spirit stones, the cultivator said plainly. Yu Qianqiu nodded. He pretended to take out a mid-grade spirit stone from his robes and handed it over. Guan Yu's eyelid twitched when he saw this. Only then did he remember that the one thing this guy didn't lack was spirit stones. The cultivator took out a Jade archive and let Yu Qianqiu imbue it with true qi. After that, the cultivator made a hand seal and shot a beam of white light at the Jade archive. Once the Jade archive was handed over to Yu Qianqiu, the matter was settled. "This registration is really simple," Yu Qianqiu muttered as he touched the Jade archive in his hand. Guan Yu smiled. "It looks simple, but unless you personally hold the Jade archive and imbue it with true qi, you won't be able to barge in." After passing through the city gate, Yu Qianqiu's eyes immediately lit up. He really didn't expect to find such a good place in the depths of the mountains. Shops and taverns stood in great numbers, and hawkers could be seen everywhere. Cultivators dressed in all sorts of clothing came and went. Chapter 35. As the two strolled around the city, Yu Qianqiu looked around. Everything here was new to him. Guan Yu glanced at him. Although his anger had dissipated a lot after getting along with him for a while, he still couldn't help but take it to heart that his primordial spirit was controlled by someone else. He asked, "Are you going to take a look and leave, or are you going to stay here for a few days?" Yu Qianqiu was full of interest. He nodded and said, "Why do you want to leave when you just arrived? Stay a few more days. You're familiar with this place. What do you think is a good place to stay?" Guan Yu inadvertently smiled and said, "Come with me." The two walked forward and passed by a big square. There were many people setting up all kinds of stalls. Guan Yu brought him to the front of an inn. Yu Qianshou looked around and discovered that the inn in front of him was probably the most imposing one he had seen so far. The signboard above the entrance read, "100 Flowers House." He didn't think too much about it and followed them in. As soon as they entered, a waiter came over and greeted them enthusiastically. "Two guests. Are you going to eat or stay?" Yu Qianshou looked at the waiter and found that he was also Qi training level 7. Guan Yu went to the front of the counter and knocked, calling out, "Manager, give me 2 of the best rooms." The fat man, who was busy at the counter, hurried over. The fat man smiled and said, "The best room costs 10 mid-grade spirit stones a day, and 2 rooms cost 20 mid-grade spirit stones. May I know how long the 2 of you would like to stay?" "How many days?" Guan Yu turned and asked. Yu Qianshou was stunned for a while. Then he frowned and said, "Are you kidding me? 2 rooms cost 20 mid-grade spirit stones a day. Disciples from normal sects can't even afford a day's stay, even with half a year's worth of spirit stones." The fat shopkeeper said, "Little brother, I'm afraid this is your first time here. Our 100 Flowers house was opened by the 100 Flowers Palace, and it's also the best inn in the entire 100 Flowers Valley. If you stay here, you can rest in peace. No matter if it's the righteous Tao or the devil Tao, not many would dare to cause trouble here. Therefore, 20 mid-grade spirit stones a day is definitely worth it." "Humph. If no one dares to come and cause trouble, doesn't that mean there are still people who dare to come and cause trouble?" Yu Qianshou muttered. When he saw the manager's expression change, he thought about how it wasn't beneficial for him to offend the members of the Flower Palace since he'd just arrived here, so he could only change his words. "Then I'll stay for a day first." The shopkeeper's expression immediately relaxed, and he said with a smile, "Then I'll give the 2 of you 2 superior rooms." Yu Qianshou nodded and pretended to put his hand into his empty lapel. He took out 2 handfuls of spirit stones and placed them on the counter. When the shopkeeper saw that he was able to grab 2 large handfuls of spirit stones from his flat clothes, he couldn't help but stare at him strangely. Yu Qianshou's heart trembled, and he thought to himself that he would have to buy a storage bag to show off. After the shopkeeper registered, he called the waiter to bring the 2 of them upstairs. Yu Qianshou inadvertently glanced at the strange smile on Guan Yu's face. He was slightly startled, and he immediately understood what was going on. "I was wondering why he brought me to such an expensive place. So it turns out that he has a problem with me. Damn it. Do you want me to lose some money? This isn't a good sign, and I have to put out in time." The place that he spent a lot of money to stay in was indeed different. The items and furnishings in the room were really good. When he opened the window, he saw the square. Looking at the bustling square, Yu Qianshou was in a good mood. The haze of being schemed against by Guan Yu had also lightened a little. "In the market of the cultivation world. Let's see what good things they have." Yu Qianshou muttered a few words, and he slowly walked out of the inn. He walked in the market with his hands clasped behind his back, looking at the vendors around him. If one didn't know the situation, who would know that this was the cultivation world? Yu Qianshou slowly walked from stall to stall, but he didn't find many things that he recognized. When he arrived in front of a stall, he discovered that it was very quiet, completely different from the bustling surroundings. Suddenly, he saw that the table was filled with all kinds of talismans. He couldn't help but stop and ask, "Fellow Taoist, what are these used for?" The stall owner hurriedly stood up, pointed at the talismans, and introduced, "These are smoke talismans. When you encounter danger, they can be used to escape. 1 low-grade spirit stone for 10 of them. These are fire talismans. When you throw one out, it can ignite a 1-meter tall flame within a 3-meter radius. It can last for 10 breaths of time. 1 low-grade spirit stone for 1. These are arrow talismans. Within a 300-meter radius, it can hit anything. It can penetrate a 1-foot-thick brick wall. 2 low-grade spirit stones for 1. These are Vajra talismans." The more Yu Qianshou listened, the brighter his eyes became. These were simply good things that were necessary for murder and arson. He couldn't help but carefully size up the stall owner in front of him. He was a young man in his early 20s, a level 8 aura refining cultivator. "Fellow Taoist, do you want to buy them? If you buy more, you can get a lower price," the young cultivator sincerely asked. Yu Qianqiu smiled and asked, "Did you make all these yourself?" The young cultivator nodded and said, "I made them myself. This is a secret technique passed down in my family. If it wasn't for my lack of cultivation and the fact that I can't make more powerful talismans, I wouldn't have been reduced to selling these low-level talismans to make a living." Yu Qianqiu smiled and asked, "What's wrong? Don't you have any relatives in your family?" The young man sadly lowered his head and slightly shook it. "I want to buy them, but I don't know how effective they are," Yu Qianqiu said with a bit of hesitation. The young cultivator became a bit anxious and said, "Fellow Taoist, are you afraid that the talismans I make won't be effective because of my young age? If you don't believe me, we can find a remote place and try it." Yu Qianqiu rubbed his nose and muttered, "Then let's find a place and try it. If the effect is really good, then I want all of them." "Fellow Taoist, please wait a moment." Hearing that he wanted all the talismans if the effect was good, the young cultivator quickly packed up his stall and led Yu Qianqiu to the outskirts of the small town. Yu Qianqiu looked around and found that it was really remote. He nodded his head in satisfaction and said, "Fellow Taoist, try a few talismans." The young cultivator immediately took out a few different talismans from his bag and displayed them one by one in front of him. The effect was really good. Yu Qianqiu was very happy and couldn't help but feel strange and asked, "I see that your stall is deserted. It seems like there isn't even anyone looking. Could it be that the talismans you make are so unattractive?" The young cultivator slowly lowered his head and replied, "Honestly, this is the first day I've set up a stall here. Many people were very enthusiastic when they first saw the talismans, but once they heard that I made them, they didn't want to buy them, because talismans are usually made by people with higher cultivation." So, his voice lowered. Yu Qianqiu understood what he meant and thought that this unlucky child was too honest. Couldn't he just say that it was his father or master who made them? "Fellow Taoist, just treat it as helping me. You saw the power of my talismans earlier. Talismans of the same level aren't any weaker than others. If you buy more, I will definitely give you the lowest price. Otherwise, I won't even be able to pay for tomorrow's stall." The young cultivator said in a pleading tone, "All right, I want all of them." Yu Qianqiu patted his shoulder and said as he looked around. The young cultivator happily nodded his head. However, he heard the buyer pat his shoulder and say, "I want you too." Before he could react, he felt his vision blur. Chapter 36. Yu Qianqiu looked around again, walked back with his hands behind his back, and murmured, "Young man, follow me from now on. I promise you'll eat and drink well every day." Someone in my previous life said it well. What's the most expensive thing in this century? Talent. Damn it. Only today did I realize I have the potential to be a talent scout. What a pity. He wandered back to the market, saw the young cultivator's empty stall, and couldn't help but smile. He continued to wander between the stalls. "Fellow Taoist, where can I buy a storage bag?" Yu Qianqiu finally met a cultivator that he could confirm was of a lower level than him, and asked him. The cultivator smiled and said, "Storage bags are relatively high-grade items. You can't buy them from the stalls. You'll have to go to the surrounding stalls to find them." Yu Qianqiu looked around at the well-decorated stalls and cupped his hands in thanks. Passing through the square, he looked at the stalls one by one and found that the items here were clearly marked, but the prices were indeed not comparable to the stalls outside, and some were even scarily expensive. After walking through a few stalls, he didn't find any storage bags, and under the guidance of others, he finally found a shop called Hidden Secrets Pavilion, and indeed found the storage bag he wanted to buy. The shopkeeper inside greeted enthusiastically, "Fellow Taoist, what would you like to buy?" Yu Qianqiu looked around and said, "I want to buy a storage bag." The shopkeeper laughed and said, "Fellow Taoist, you come to the right place. Our Sect storage bags are famous in the cultivation world. They are durable, and one can be used for 1 or 200 years without a problem. How big do you want? Our store has storage bags that can hold up to 3 rooms. What's the price?" "Forget it. Just give me the cheapest one." Yu Qianqiu said he was just using it for show anyway. There was no need to waste money. No matter how rich he was, he wouldn't do what that prodigal did. The shopkeeper was slightly stunned, This was the first time he met someone who spoke so straightforwardly and said with a slightly embarrassed smile, "The cheapest one is naturally the one with a room. It's one high-grade spirit stone." One high-grade spirit stone? So expensive. Shopkeeper, you didn't lie to me, did you? Yu Qianqiu exclaimed. The shopkeeper didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Fellow Taoist must be joking. This shop has been in business for hundreds of years and storage bags have always been sold at this price. If you don't believe me, you can go out and ask around. Forget it. Since it's a time-honored brand, there's no need to ask. Give me one. After saying that, he took out a high-grade spirit stone. After receiving the storage bag, Yu Qianqiu still mumbled, "Such a small bag actually costs a high-grade spirit stone." After hanging the bag on his waist, he didn't even need to look to know that it was a cultivator. After leaving the hidden secret pavilion, Yu Qianqiu continued to stroll around one shop after another. He discovered one thing, and that was that almost all of the famous sects in the cultivation world had a shop here. He wondered if there was a shop owned by Ong Kwangsung. After strolling around, he finally saw Ong Kwangsung's logo in front of a shop. He didn't know what Ong Kwangsung had for sale and what was on sale inside. He wanted to go in, but he was afraid of bumping into someone he knew. He shook his head. Safety first. It was better not to go in. Junior Marshall's sister. Come here quickly. Our Ong Kwangsung shop is here. Yu Qianqiu didn't walk far when he suddenly heard a familiar voice, and he turned to look. Hey, the world was really small. There would be no meeting without enmity. It was really an old acquaintance, the direct grandson of Ong Kwangsung's sect leader, Lu Jingguang. He didn't know who that Junior Marshall sister was, but he felt that her back was somewhat familiar. After thinking for a while, he resisted the urge to go over and mock Lu Jingguang. Although this was Hundred Flower Palace's territory and no one dared to fight, he couldn't beat him. Running over to show off his tongue wasn't something a hero would do. After thinking about it, it would be better to wait until he had the strength to beat someone up in the future. The mountains didn't change and the rivers flowed. There would always be a time when he met him and took care of him. After strolling around the stalls for a while, he bought a bunch of things that he didn't know if they were useful or not. In any case, after buying things that he was interested in, the sky gradually darkened, and he slowly walked back to Hundred Flower House. When he walked to Guan Yu's room, he found that Guan Yu was still sleeping soundly on the bed. He couldn't help but sigh. This was the sorrow of refining Qi level 10. If you couldn't break through to the foundation building stage, then what was the point of cultivating? It was no different from eating and waiting for death. Yinchang, wake up. This boss will take you to eat and drink. Yu Qianqiu used his foot to wake Guan Yu up. The two went downstairs of Hundred Flower House and ordered a bunch of food. Looking at the table full of food, Yu Qianqiu ordered whatever was good. He might be stingy with other things, but he would never treat himself unfairly when it came to food. Drinking big bowls of wine and eating big pieces of meat, it felt so good. The stalls outside were lit up, and even the stalls in the square had become a night market. The two ate and drank, enjoying the scenery outside. Junior Marshall's sister, come quickly. This is the best inn in the Hundred Flowers Valley, Hundred Flower House. Manager, give me 2 of the best rooms. He heard that familiar voice again. Yu Qianqiu turned his head to look. It was really a small world for enemies. It was that guy Lu Jingguang again, leaning on the counter to pick a room. Forget it. I'll just pretend I didn't see it. Just as Yu Qianqiu was about to look away, a young girl walked in the door, and he couldn't look away. It was none other than the woman he was most familiar with in Ong Kwangsung, Chu Ping-er. As Chu Ping-er looked around and sized up Hundred Flower House, she also saw that familiar face near the window. Chu Ping-er couldn't believe it. She thought to herself, am I seeing things? Isn't he dead? The two just looked at each other. Yu Qianqiu pouted and gestured at Lu Jingguang. He put a finger in front of his mouth and made a shushing gesture. Chu Ping-er's face immediately lit up, and her eyes showed unconcealable excitement. The other party's actions undoubtedly proved his identity. She looked at Lu Jingguang and knew what he was referring to. She nodded slightly. The two booked a room and were brought upstairs by the staff. On the way upstairs, Chu Ping couldn't help but look at him again. Yu Qianshou smiled and pointed at himself, then upstairs, telling her that he was also staying upstairs. Chu Ping walked up with light steps. Seeing that Lu Jingguang had also gone upstairs, Yu Qianshou felt a chill run down his spine. He actually dared to get a room with his chick. He must be tired of living. Then he remembered that Lu Jingguang had booked 2 rooms, and he felt a little better. However, he still couldn't swallow his anger. Guan Yu used his chopsticks to knock on Yu Qianshou's chopsticks. He smiled and said, "Boss, she's already upstairs. Are you still in a daze? Why? Have you fallen for her?" Yu Qianshou rolled his eyes at him. At this time, a guest at the table next to them turned around and said, "Young man, you have to look carefully. That's Ong Kwangsung's man. Ong Kwangsung is now a big deal. You can't just mess with him." Yu Qianshou turned his head to look at the guest behind him, then glanced at the simple dishes on the table. He smiled and said, "If you don't mind, please come over and have a drink with me. I have something to ask." The person was a slightly sloppy old man. He laughed and said, "Then I won't stand on ceremony." He stood up. Yu Qianshou smiled and stretched out his hand. "Please." The old man came over and sat down. Yu Qianshou poured him a glass of wine and toasted him together with Guan Yu. After the old man ate a few mouthfuls of food, Yu Qianshou said respectfully, "I heard from you that Ong Kwangsung is now a big deal. I'm ignorant, so I hope you can enlighten me." You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.